At a store called Kang's Makguksu, a banner announced the first place for the new employee in the Seoul group, the eldest daughter of Kang Makguksu. Voices spread as several women chatted, and a brown-haired woman with bangs was trying on some business clothes. Next to her, a woman and two boys complimented her because the clothes were worth every penny invested, and the boys praised their sister, saying she looked great like that. She seemed very mature that way, although she could only think about the cost calculations of using those clothes. It was 5 workdays for 52 weeks, which amounted to 260 times. If she wore them once every 3 days, it was still 87 times. If she did this for 3 years, then those clothes would cost 1,000 won per day, which were good costs for someone making long-term investments. Moving her arms, she tested the clothes, realizing this might be the only thing she would wear for 3 months, making the woman sigh and ask Mingyang what it all meant. After all, she was a smart girl, so she knew she would do well wherever she went, but she still couldn't help but feel worried. Work was different from school, with mandatory overtime, irrational bosses, company policies. There would be moments when things happened for no reason at all. So, no matter what happened, she should remember these 3 things. First, the woman advised her to do what her superiors told her without arguing or complaining. Second, she should tell people what they wanted to hear, instead of what she really felt. And lastly, she should just smile, no matter what happened. It had been 10 years since then, and Mingyang acted exactly as her mother had told her, obeying her superiors, saying the right things, always with a smile. And with her superhuman business acumen, she became the top employee, first in the employee training workshop, earning first place in the performance evaluation. She was the colleague everyone wanted to work with, the #1 athlete on the company's sports day, first in the company trivia, first in customer satisfaction, among others. She excelled at everything and was climbing through the promotions, becoming the youngest senior manager ever, or at least she should have been until the day before, when she heard she would become an executive assistant because there would be an official designation soon. Therefore, she would become the executive assistant and advisor to TK Corporation's CEO, Isiop Ta. Although she was a senior manager now, suddenly they wanted to demote her to a secretary's job, even after 10 years of working so hard. Suddenly, she was going through this hardship, which made Mingyang question whether she had made any mistakes, so she asked to know exactly what had happened. Her boss denied it was the case, smiling because, quite the contrary, she was brilliant at everything. Despite that, he knew it was an unexpected move on his part. It was a pity for him too, as he didn't want to lose such a talent like her. Sighing, he told her she was the only one in the entire company who could handle the infamous CEO Isiop Ta. Moreover, CEO Ta said she would see that Song Bakjae would make her a suitable offer. Cypress pines formed a green barrier, and even the sunlight shining through them seemed harsh. A historical symbol of South Korean business, this was also the home of the TK Group's CEO, Siwon Ta. Thinking about going to Song Bakjae meant that her fate would soon be decided by the TK Group's CEO, Siwon Ta. It was all or nothing. This could be the biggest opportunity of her life or the greatest crisis ever. Thus, CEO Ta packed his bags to travel, looking ready to go on vacation somewhere. Next to him, CEO Ta was called by a young man in a suit, who was the manager Ji-chaeum Kim, who asked him if he had a good flight. He agreed while handing his bags to Kim, who smiled and said the business trip must have been stressful. Still, stressful wasn't quite the word, because for Isiop, the business trip was just an excuse. He hadn't taken a vacation in years because he had been too busy working. This was his chance to finally unwind. 34 years ago, he gave his life to TK so that he could have Song Bakjae someday, only for Junsup to suddenly appear and take over the company's business. Because of that, despite being angry, he let Junsup take care of everything and just went on a business trip without even warning. Eager to see how the company would function without his presence, he got into the car to head to the Cheongdong apartment. Kim, while driving, told him that they were instructed to take him directly to the strategy office once he landed from his flight. This caught Isiop by surprise, sighing because he was exhausted, so they should go home instead, when he received a call. Annoyed again, he wondered who was calling just as he had gotten off his plane. He noticed, picking up the phone, that it was Junseok himself, so he quickly hung up without thinking twice, as he just wanted to relax. However, he couldn't even do that because the car stopped in traffic, where numerous cars honked, further irritating him, making Isiop complain that it must be all Junseok's fault again, especially since he was calling once more. When Kim agreed that this was the case, Isiop told him to either hang up or answer the call, until the manager showed him that it was actually Secretary Mingyang Kang calling. This made Isiop widen his eyes, wondering if this was the same one who joined the company at the same time as him. Kim confirmed that she was indeed the manager, while Isiop thought that he always knew she was odd, but now wondered why she was calling the executive director directly like this. At this, Kim mentioned that he would probably need to answer, which made Isiop question why. as it was irritating. Either way, he answered the call, to which Kang smiled as she greeted him, because from now on, she would be his personal secretary and executive assistant. This made Useop question why such a talented manager as her would be his secretary, and if it was all Junseop's fault. Letting out a nervous laugh, she replied that he could get the details later with him, and she would even pass the phone to him directly. Useop wondered if Junseop had lost his mind, saying that she wasn't his secretary, so she should stop with these jokes. It was a bit too much to drop on someone who had just returned from a business trip, and he was going to rest, so she should inform him of that. Then, he simply hung up on Kang, who smiled as she told Junseop that Useop had hung up. At that, Junseop smiled too, and told her to proceed with the schedule anyway, while meanwhile, Useop managed to find some time to lie down in his bed and rest, or so he thought until his phone started vibrating again with another call. This made him sigh and sit up in bed to answer the call, asking what had happened now. In response, Kim asked if he could come in for a moment, mentioning that he was outside his house. That was because senior manager Kang wanted to come in as well and was there with him, which made him jump out of bed in total shock, asking how she had figured something like that out, until Kang herself grabbed Kim's phone to talk to him directly. At that, Useop questioned if she really had to do everything they told her like that. She had her own job to take care of, and besides, she had made the whole trip there. Still smiling, she replied that from that day on, she would be working as his personal secretary and executive assistant. This made him widen his eyes in surprise, and Kang agreed because this was a direct order from Song Bakje. That's why she regretted that they didn't have much time to waste, so she would enter his house now, whether he liked it or not. This made Useop shout, running out of bed, but ending up tripping and falling hard on the floor, dropping his phone. Right in front of the door, he rushed to get dressed before Kang could enter and see something she shouldn't. However, Kang opened the door anyway after a moment, greeting him good morning, only to see the scene of Useop barely able to get up, flustered. After seeing him blush, she slowly backed away and closed the door as if nothing had happened, leaving Useop shouting in frustration and embarrassment. A little while later, he came out to talk with the two outside, with Kang commenting that they still had 15 minutes left, asking if that was enough time for him, which Useop denied, saying he wasn't ready at all because he hadn't even showered yet, was hungry, and had nothing to wear. Adjusting her glasses, Kang reassured him that everything was fine, pointing to Kim, who immediately showed two outfits ready, dry, and clean for him to wear. Moreover, they had prepared sandwiches for breakfast, though Useop said he didn't eat sandwiches. Kang insisted, saying it was a ham and cheese sandwich without vegetables, just the way he liked it, and they also prepared eggs for his breakfast. That shut him up, as Kang then said she would present him with a detailed agenda in the car, though he complained that it wasn't the most important thing. Pointing at her, he questioned whether a secretary really had permission to enter his house like that. This was a personal space, so he would do whatever he wanted inside his house. He could even walk around naked like before if he wished. Leaning in, he asked if she could really handle this, which made her ask if he felt uncomfortable because she was a woman. This made Useop go silent before bursting out in laughter, finding that stupid question hilarious. He wouldn't feel uncomfortable over something like that. At that, Kang smiled, concluding it was a relief that he felt comfortable around her, continuing to say they had 10 minutes left until departure. She also pointed out that there was little time for his shower, so she instructed Kim to bring the hot towel they had prepared in advance, knowing this would happen. She put on gloves while Kim helped with the cleaning products, ready to start helping him clean up, which startled Useop. He questioned what all this was and why they were carrying these weird things, demanding they get them out of his sight right now. With that, the two stared at each other for a long moment before Useop sighed, asking them to wait, saying he would finish washing in 5 minutes. He noticed her long, straight hair, her boring glasses, the two-piece suit, keeping the same appearance for 10 years somehow, which was incredible. She hadn't changed at all since the first time he saw her, and yet, Useop had never liked how she irritated him. As usual, when they introduced the top employees of the 53rd class in the TK employee training group. In first place, Kang received that recognition, and various applause from others followed, with Useop standing just behind her in second place. His whole life had been aimed at earning the title of TK Group's successor. Fortunately, he was able to meet everyone's expectations, with people always praising him. When he was still a child, they called him gifted, but all of it was thanks to his incredible effort to achieve that great recognition. That's why Useop had never fallen below first place, but suddenly, he was in second place for the first time in his life. On that day, People greeted them with applause as the two best employees of the company in front of everyone. Despite that, Isiop wasn't happy at all being behind her, clenching his fists furiously to the point of shaking. In the present, after the shower, he began drying his hair with the hairdryer, ensuring he used the 5 minutes given, receiving praise from Kang for it. The two stared at each other again, with Isiop still somewhat surprised because, of all people, he never expected her to become his secretary. He put on his dress shirt, telling Kang that he never liked clingy secretaries, sticking by his side all the time. After a moment of silence, she responded that she would try hard to adjust to his preferences, and he began to disagree. That, in fact, he was very good at false kindness, so he could put up with people he didn't like. Still, he intended to be straightforward with her, stating that he didn't like Manager Kang at all. This made her widen her eyes, hearing from Isiop that since the first day of employee training, from the moment they were placed in the same group, he never liked her. He leaned in close to her, suggesting that she should quit and resign. Then, after another moment of silence that made her tense, Kang asked for permission to respond, saying that they were actually 7 minutes late, so they should leave right away, shocking him because she had simply ignored everything he had just said. And both Kang and Kim pointed out that President Siwon was waiting for him. The perfectly calm scene made him sigh, finally agreeing to leave after finishing getting dressed. Walking down the halls, Kang still remembered Isiop telling her he didn't like her, wondering about that, because in truth, she never liked Isiop either, since the first day they saw each other, more than 10 years ago. Even though he was supposedly the heir to the TK group, from her perspective, he seemed more like a spoiled prince. During the car ride, as they continued to their destination, Kang looked at him through the reflection. Kang couldn't help but think that, in terms of appearance, Isiop was exactly her type of guy. A week ago, Kang had met with the CEO of the TK group, Siwon Tae, who said he had heard a lot about her from director Junseop. She must have been a very efficient worker, which is why he hoped she would take good care of his boy, Isiop Ta. Hearing this made her a bit nervous, stuttering that she still had much to learn, until Siwon interrupted, mentioning that he had heard her younger brothers were athletes, promising ice sports athletes. If they were anything like her, they surely must have been quite talented. At TK, they liked supporting talented athletes, reminding her of what Junseop said, that soon she might find out that Song Bakjae would make her an offer. It suited her, the red in the depths of his eyes, in a way that made Kang break into a cold sweat, wondering if this was what the director had been talking about. When she left the meeting with Siwon, she sighed because that conversation had been so intimidating it made her tremble in place. His beastly eyes stared at her, as if to say she'd better do an excellent job. Taking a deep breath, Kang tried not to stay scared for too long after all. She had worked hard and done well so far. Her twin brothers were probably very worried about money. If her younger siblings didn't have to worry about anything but training, that would be good. It was then, just as she was thinking about them, that she received a call from her two brothers, celebrating on the other end of the line. They truly were a blessed family with the sponsorship from TK Corporation, and Kang stammered that she was happy for them, thinking that as long as they were happy, that was all that really mattered to her, even if she had to keep working under these circumstances. Back to the present, as she thought about how Isiop was still totally her type, she had to restrain herself because she couldn't dwell on that too much. Taking a deep breath, she tried to keep composed because she needed Isiop's approval at any cost to secure funds for her brothers and family. And so, her first day as Isiop Tae's assistant and personal secretary began. When they arrived, the conversation between Isiop and Siwon started, with the grandson bringing a gift for him as a memento because he had received the same from him as a child. Smiling, he asked how his grandfather's health was, to which Siwon replied that he was fine this time, though his shoulders were tense. Watching them, the protagonist thought he seemed like a completely different person from the last time she saw him. As Isiop suggested that they go on a trip together, Kang thought he seemed compassionate, but the grandfather responded that he felt more comfortable at home. To Kang, it seemed that Isiop was the only person who could make Siwon feel at ease. It was then that Siwon began to talk to her as well, looking at her seriously while asking if she was doing her job properly. She hesitated, wondering why she was getting that intimidating look, and replied that it was her first day, so some things could still be improved. Siwon agreed because she had been a bit late, and Kang promised that wouldn't happen again, squeezing her trembling hands. This made Isiop notice her reaction, wondering what was wrong since she was acting like the complete opposite of before. The old man continued, saying he expected a lot from her, and she responded that she wouldn't let him down. Although she kept nervously replying that she would do her best to meet expectations, Isiop thought she seemed terrified for some reason. It was then that Siwon said he wanted his grandson to visit Song Bakjae more often to say hello and report on business, pressuring Kang to remember this, which she quickly agreed to, as Siwon insisted that Isiop was the heart of TK Corporation, and that was why he needed TK's most talented employee as his assistant. This time, it was Isiop who stammered, agreeing that there was no one better for the job than manager Kang, until he began talking about something, which made the protagonist nervous, worried that he was going to start talking about the incident of visiting his house and her being his secretary. Kang didn't want to risk getting fired on her first day, and he noticed that she was genuinely breaking into a cold sweat this time. This made him hesitate before continuing, mentioning how she was acting as his secretary, which made Kang grab his arm, shaking her head with red, almost teary eyes, in a way Isiop had never seen before, which made him nervous too. After she interrupted almost 3 times, Siwon asked what the problem was and what exactly he wanted to say. Finally, Isiop said that he just wanted to thank his grandfather for appointing her as his secretary, thus ignoring the previous topic. Later, they left the meeting with Siwon, with Kang sighing in relief, exhausted after just one conversation. She almost felt that it was because she had pushed herself too hard at work that day, so she headed back to her apartment. Barely able to wait for the chance to take a shower and relax, she opened the door to her house. Startled when she saw her brothers running to greet her, happy because they had been waiting and even complained about how long she took to arrive. Also, there was Kang's roommate, C.A. Lee, who greeted her with a smile, seeing that she must have been tired. She probably hadn't eaten yet either, so she was preparing something, but Kang was still too confused and surprised by everyone's presence there. Lee mentioned that she had heard the good news from her twin brothers, and that's why they were preparing a surprise party. After understanding that, Lee told her to take a shower while the twins agreed they wanted to help in the kitchen. Seeing the chaos of the lively conversation, Kang wondered what they were good for when she was the one carrying all the burden. Anyway, she went to shower and came out a little later, relieved after shaking off some of the exhaustion. With that, Lee commented that her older brother would be arriving soon, and they could all eat together once he got there. This caught Kang off guard, especially since the doorbell rang when Lee's brother arrived, and she ran out to greet him. She greeted him happily, excited to see her brother after a long time, asking when he returned to Korea and if he got stuck in traffic. A little later, Kang also came out of her room to meet Lee's brother, who smiled at her after it had been so long since they last saw each other. Smiling, the protagonist greeted Hyun-song, Lee's brother, surprised that he hadn't mentioned he was coming back. This made him laugh, saying it seemed she was still the same as ever to react like that, and then he patted Kang's hair, making her blush a little. She then tugged on her shirt, asking if he was referring to that, and he agreed because she still liked that childish character on her shirt. Kang Dokko was her favorite character from the children's TV show, Veggie Rangers. The more he peeled, the more appealing he became, but he wasn't very popular among kids. In fact, they were all like one big family, as they were born and raised in the same town, so naturally, they were quite close. Since Kang graduated earlier than other kids, she had no friends her age when she entered the best school in the country at 17. However, both Lee and Hyun were still part of her youthful memories, where they spent a lot of time together during that period. Hyun was her senior in school, and he helped her a lot since she entered the school so young. He was like a reliable older brother. Now, they were all toasting together at the dinner table, with Lee laughing that it was a shame Kang didn't appreciate the refreshing taste of beer. She always said she was missing out on one of life's greatest pleasures, which made Kang laugh because there was nothing to be done when she couldn't handle alcohol. But it would be nice to drink on a day like that, making Lee celebrate because the twins had been sponsored by TK, and Hyun had landed a new job. So, they were going to celebrate those achievements, prompting the twins to comment that Hyun was truly amazing for being hired by a law firm. It really was incredible of him, and they asked if he was back in Korea for good now. Hyun agreed and said he was planning to settle there, having been assigned to work with TK Corporation. So, he asked which department the protagonist worked in, and she laughed because she had just started working there. In fact, Lee excitedly mentioned that it was her first day as a secretary, which made her deflate immediately as she remembered it. Still, Lee kept asking her opinion about working with the infamous Isiop, and she stammered to respond. This made her friend laugh, noticing her look of disgust, to the point where she continued with interview-like questions. That was because Isiop was the only paternal grandson of Siwon Tae, the CEO of the country's leading company, the TK Group. Since childhood, he had been the likely successor to TK, and he was known for his doll-like appearance, capturing the nation's attention with his noble image. This attention led paparazzi and reporters to invade his privacy, which could be why he avoided the media and disappeared from the public eye as he grew up. As a result, various rumors about his beauty were spreading like legends even now. That's why Lee was so excited that Kang had been assigned to work alongside a third-generation heir, so handsome that people exchanged photo cards of him. But still, she had nothing to say about it. Besides, if she were his executive assistant, it could be a big stepping stone to success within the company. Slowly, the protagonist agreed and said she'd just be happy not to get fired, which immediately caught Lee's attention. Sweating a little, Kang confessed that Isiop didn't like her much. making everyone scream in shock, asking why. She explained that they had started at the company at the same time, and it seemed like they weren't compatible for some reason, because he had said he didn't like her from the day he saw her during training, and she also saw him as an idiot. They didn't get along but still had to work together. It was an uncomfortable, symbiotic relationship. Sighing, Hyun commented that it must be stressful to work with Up when they didn't get along, but had to spend all their time together. Still, the protagonist replied that it was worth it for the incentives she received in return, though seeing the tension in her shoulders. Hyun said that money was important, but she should always remember that her health came first. In his opinion, she always worked too hard, and Kang replied that she was working just enough not to worry him. He was too kind to her. If her boss were even half as good as he was, she wouldn't be in such a disastrous situation right now. As she said that, suddenly she received several messages telling her to prepare client meeting documents and bring them to his apartment by 7. This made the protagonist tense with irritation, annoyed, because he really was a pain to deal with. The next day, however, the protagonist returned to her perfect secretary performance to meet Up in the morning. She greeted him with a smile, but he responded that she was 30 minutes late, which was obviously a provocation. Kang said she arrived on time, but the front password had changed, drawing an innocent look from him as if wondering why. The protagonist said she adjusted the schedule so it wouldn't affect the workday, frustrated internally because that idiot Up had changed the password to make her late. In response, Up ignored that, hearing from her that whenever he was ready, she could report the day's schedule, and he turned around, mentioning he was tired because he had just woken up. To this, she replied that she had anticipated something like that happening and had prepared his breakfast. Seeing this made Up grimace, raising his hand to say that he only drank coffee made from Kenyan beans prepared in a specific, well-balanced way, dismissing her effort and ordering her to get rid of that coffee, pointing to the other side of the apartment to throw it out. Despite being irritated, Kang asked about the meeting for the day, and he yawned, saying he needed to rest a little more. She reminded him that Director Tae was waiting for him, but Up seemed uninterested in going to see Junsup, complaining about being up so early. At that, he told her to cancel the meeting, which made Kang start to tremble with rage, thinking she had only been a secretary for 2 days. For the first time in her 10-year career, she felt her patience being truly tested, but even so, she agreed with Up's words. Later, the two went to Up's office, where the protagonist reported that it would take some time to establish ownership of TK Electronics. But the reorganization of TK Corporation was on schedule. The next steps were logistics, construction, trade, and the resort, along with TK Fashion. Sighing, Up said that she had left the presentation for TK Fashion last, which was the biggest headache of all. TK Fashion was the foundation of the TK Group, but its consistently poor performance had become the group's greatest headache. Remembering this, Up questioned how he could be forced to deal with that business. The sales were slow, and there were talks of selling the division. It was far too difficult to find ways to fix it quickly, shouting that he had worked all these years just for Junsup to take all the divisions that actually made money, while he was stuck with the problematic leftovers. He didn't even want to work, frustrated because all he wanted was to leave everything behind. This was not good news for Kang. It was obvious that Up wasn't motivated to work at all. Watching this pitiful scene, she wondered how she was supposed to work with someone so unmotivated. What had happened to the determined Up she had met during training, who was always at the forefront of everything? And even though he always seemed like a big jerk to the protagonist, back then, he at least seemed somewhat worthy of the title of heir. At least, that's how it seemed to her, watching from the outside, always so busy and working harder for his goals and future. Now the protagonist stayed quiet, watching Up, which made him ask if she had just thought he was doing something wrong. She stammered that it wasn't the case, remembering she should maintain her composure as a secretary during her work there. At that, Up commented that she must have thought that before she was a rising senior manager, but now she had to work with Up Tae, who was going nowhere. She stammered that it wasn't true, and she hadn't thought that at all, that it was an honor to help him with his work. Standing up, Up stared at Kang and approached her, who remained silent until she heard him say that her lips were dry. Leaning in, he remarked that she should at least find a way to moisten her lips before lying like that in front of him. After that, he turned back to the desk where he was sitting, telling her not to do it again, then stretching with a yawn. Meanwhile, Kang blushed, touching her own lips, her heart pounding after that sudden closeness and those words, wondering if she would really be okay there. 10 years in the past, the new employees of the 53rd class were warmly welcomed into the TK family. As everyone clapped during the event while the announcer narrated, Up watched the protagonist standing next to him. She was the girl who had surpassed him as the best new employee of the company, and after learning about that, his grandfather told him to keep an eye on her during the workshop, to assess if she had potential as someone trustworthy or if she was just too smart for her own good. That's what his grandfather said, but even during the times they spent in the workshop, Up didn't want to think about Kang around for too long. While walking through the corridors of the workshop, people always talked about Asura, wondering if he was some kind of model and how he was the hare who had it all. When he noticed people talking about him and smiled, Asura always managed to make the girls smile happily because they had gotten his attention. He was used to receiving that kind of attention from women. They couldn't even look directly at his face before becoming embarrassed and walking away. But it was a type of attention that wasn't welcome to him. In fact, Asura always thought it was all a huge annoyance. That's why, when he could walk in quiet places, it felt like he could finally breathe away from the commotion of the other students. It was too exhausting to maintain a perfect image all the time, until one day, he saw Kang walking by while reading. He stayed silent when she noticed his presence, and then she smiled at him, catching him off guard because Kang didn't look away. In fact, she made direct eye contact without hesitation, but she didn't stop or rush. She just walked past him naturally. However, for some reason, Asura felt offended by that reaction, and he still remembered those times. When he woke up from a small nap in his office, he wondered what kind of dream that was. Then he heard voices outside saying they were coming in, knocking on the door to announce it, and despite Asura asking her to wait, Kang burst into the office cheerfully, bringing documents that needed his approval, irritating him because she always came in before getting permission. Even so, he paused, staring at Kang, remembering the person he knew from the past in the workshop, and went silent. While Kang said she thought he might be sleeping, so she couldn't wait outside any longer. She tossed several papers and documents onto his desk, which were reports on the current resort project, and he started to say it wasn't necessary. Until Asura stopped, realizing that Kang had organized all the data perfectly. It was incredibly easy to read. Noticing he was impressed, he threw the papers on the desk and told her to stop overdoing it. She could work as hard as she wanted, but it didn't mean anything, and no one cared. It wasn't like the company couldn't function without him, but Kang disagreed, saying that Executive Director Asura was an essential part of TK Corporation. Every employee at TK knew about the things he had done for the company over the past 10 years, and she wanted to say once again how much of an honor it was to see him in action. Her words silenced him before he looked away and agreed that she could leave now. He would take another look at the report later. The protagonist agreed and asked him to let her know if he needed anything, then left his office. Later, Junsup laughed, saying he finally had the chance to see Iseup's face after so long, and questioned what had happened because Iseup had said earlier he wouldn't work. The executives were delighted that he was back, saying he was doing a great job, to which Iseup responded that it wasn't his work, it was Kang's. Laughing, Junsup said he always knew she was a great idea as his secretary, and Iseup questioned how he managed to transfer her. He should know better than anyone that Kang was too good to be just an ordinary secretary working like this. Junsup laughed again and asked if Iseup really didn't know. He should have investigated over the past few days, at least talked to advertising manager In Mok Yu. Then he mentioned that Kang's twin brothers, university ice skating athletes Muwan and Minjin, were being sponsored. This made Iseup suspicious, as based on their grades, they didn't seem qualified for it, and Junsup replied that the sponsorship was based on their potential. That made Iseup go quiet before asking if they were doing this just to keep her as his secretary, and Junsup retorted that no one ever told him to leave work and travel abroad like that. They needed someone of her caliber to compensate for Iseup's absence. From what he had discovered, Kang's parents ran a modest makaksu restaurant, and her twins were athletes, which must have been financially tough for them. If the offer came from Song Bakjae, it probably meant Kang wasn't in a position to refuse the proposal to work as a secretary. That almost irritated Iseup, but Junsup asserted that Kang was doing an excellent job as his assistant at the moment, so he didn't see the problem with keeping her around now. After all, Iseup knew her background, so it shouldn't bother him. This made Iseup pause to reflect on whether he was really that conflicted about Kang, and slowly he denied it, saying that wasn't the case. Still, he touched his arm, remembering how she had grabbed his arm in the same way earlier. He just didn't expect to feel that desperation in her touch and see her pleading eyes, searching for a way to maintain that situation. She made him a little uncomfortable. That must have been it, or at least that's what Iseup wanted to believe when he thought about Kang. On another day, Iseup was calmly sitting in his office one afternoon as the sunlight shone through the windows. It was a time to quietly enjoy a cup of coffee without any commitments or major concerns on a comfortable sofa, until he started hearing hurried, firm footsteps coming down the hall, and he quickly widened his eyes as he sensed the anxiety in those steps. Turning around, sweating nervously, as Kang suddenly opened the door and called for Iseup, asking if he had enjoyed his meal, making him yell in fright. With his hand on his heart, which was beating wildly, he stared at the protagonist, who said she would now start with the afternoon schedule summary, catching him completely off guard when she began rambling non-stop. It didn't take long for Iseup to start complaining to Kim about how every day felt like he was in a suspense movie. Just the sound of her heels clacking from afar was enough to make his heart race, as if she were a haunting presence. For him to give his approval on things, her heels were terrifying to that point, and Iseup always found himself trembling as he heard her approach. It was scary how Kang never left him alone, not even for a second, and even though he was her boss, he was still afraid of his secretary. Hearing these complaints, Kim smiled and replied that that was just Manager Kang's way, always full of passion and determination. Sighing, Iseup could only imagine that Kim's car was the only place where he could truly relax. Until the car started receiving a call from Manager Kang, and Kim cheerfully announced who was calling, startling Iseup. Even though Iseup told him not to answer, Kim did so anyway, making Iseup whisper to Kim not to mention he was there, although the protagonist could hear him perfectly well. She knew Lee had no plans outside the office that day, and he stammered that it couldn't be because he had something to do. But it was impossible for there to be something Kang didn't know about him, and she stated that he had a pile of work to do now and couldn't get distracted. So, she asked if she could call him back later, and Iseup stammered that no, he was busy, which made her smile and reply that she would be waiting for him at the office. Despite saying that, Kang always complained to Lee about how rude Iseup was, only returning much later than the scheduled time to leave. Sighing, she wondered if he was a child, with Lee comforting her because she had to endure so many things in her job. At her apartment, they received a visit from Hyeon, who came straight from work to see them because he missed them. Lee joked that Hyeon must have been eager for the protagonist's mother's cooking, which he agreed to with a laugh. This made Kang pack several things her mother had sent for him to eat, although he only wanted a little to satisfy his craving. She said it was fine because her mother had made a large portion, even for herself, so Hyeon could enjoy his share this time. They talked about how it seemed like everyone was quite busy, even Hyeon, but maybe not as much as Kang herself. Hyeon commented that he had heard Lee was planning to go on a blind date the next day, which shocked her, making her ask how he knew about that. He mentioned that he knew she was meeting the director of Hospital J because they attended the same elementary school, catching Lee by surprise once again. As Hyeon continued explaining, he said he found out when the director messaged him about it 3 days ago. He said he had tried to talk to Lee, but she just responded coldly, so the director asked Hyeon if he had done something wrong. Still nervous, Lee asked if she had done something wrong and if he had said anything else, and Hyeon mentioned that the director had only asked what she liked, to which Hyeon replied that she enjoyed the French restaurant at Hotel M and that she was very stylish and cute, which made the protagonist think for a moment, feeling a bit tense aside them. Then Lee started pushing her brother out of the house, laughing nervously as she shoved him out, saying they were going to sleep now. Though he didn't understand anything, Hyeon agreed and asked the protagonist to tell her mother he was grateful as Lee closed the door in his face. Sweating nervously, the protagonist asked what they had just done, and Lee nervously said everything would be fine, even though they both knew it wasn't fine at all, because 3 days ago, Lee had asked Kang to go on a blind date at an expensive restaurant. It was the French restaurant at Hotel M, which Kang knew was her friend's favorite, but she stammered that it was a great atmosphere. In response, the protagonist wasn't very excited, asking who cared about the atmosphere when going on a blind date. Still, Lee begged her friend for help, asking her to go in her place. It was the last concert Lee wanted to attend before her boys enlisted in the army. If she missed that concert, she would never have the chance to see them again, and she knew how hard it was to get those tickets. Lee said her mother wouldn't arrange any more blind dates like that as she went on this one now. So she begged Kang to go in her place in exchange for cooking and cleaning for a month, but the protagonist didn't even want any of that. After begging for so long, Kang finally gave in to the request because it would only be a 1-hour date. Thus, Lee, a fashion editor with 8 years of experience, would be replaced by Kang, who knew nothing about fashion and wore cheap, reused clothes. It was impossible for Kang to pretend to be Lee, but her friend assured her there was nothing to worry about because she was a fashion expert and would fix this visual problem in just a few minutes. So, she promised to transform Kang into the perfect Lee with her skills, or rather, she would turn her into a completely new Kang. Time passed until the dinner with the director of Hospital J finally arrived, and Lee was excited because she would get to see her favorite idols at the concert. She looked at the protagonist and asked if she was ready to go on the date, at least mentally, and Kang nervously agreed. Lee eagerly started the visual transformation on her friend and pulled her to start getting her ready. She sat her down to begin her work, bringing in a special guest to do her makeup for the day. It was fun for Lee to imitate beauty gurus, so she always spoke and played around like that, smiling as she'd ask Kang if she was ready for a makeover, showing off an organic emulsion for sensitive skin, a soothing, radiant, illuminating toner with snail essence. First, she would start with skincare, touching Kang's face and complimenting her on her great skin, even though the protagonist had no idea what was being done. Time passed as Lee worked on Kang's face, hair, and everything necessary to complete the full transformation. Not long after, when the protagonist looked at herself in the mirror, she gasped in surprise because she'd barely recognized herself. This made Lee smile, saying it was too early to be impressed. Now they could move on to the real final version, which was the process of dressing her. Meanwhile, at Hotel M, Kim mentioned it had been some time since he had driven him to a certain personal engagement, to meet up with his elementary school friends, which should be fun because it had been a while since Isiop had seen his friends. So, after dropping him off, Kim wished him a good event, and Isiop thanked him for driving him that weekend. He continued walking after receiving a message to head to the lounge bar, and so he walked, looking for the place, until he finally found it, while Kang was lost because she would never know where such a place was since she had never been to a place like that, making her late. The two followed different paths, and it didn't take long for Kang to meet the son of hospital director Jae, Jong-Yu-jung, who smiled because he had heard she was cute, so he thought she would be small, but in reality, she was tall and beautiful. The compliments made the protagonist smile, thanking him while agreeing that she was enjoying the restaurant's food, though a bit nervously. She was so nervous, in fact, that she wasn't even sure if the food was going into her mouth or her nose. Her fork barely touched the food properly. Lee had said she only needed to stay for an hour, so she just had to wait for 10 more minutes until the date ended. Then Jung asked if it would be okay to take her to the lounge bar on the top floor of the hotel. The lounge bar was very famous for its cocktail, Seoul Night. People said it was a fitting name because it had an excellent taste while you gazed at the city's night lights. She covered her mouth with a smile, apologizing because, despite it sounding tempting, she still had to work the next day. Later, she left with a sigh of relief because it was finally over. The makeup had been uncomfortable since she wasn't used to wearing it regularly, and the contact lenses were drying out her eyes, so she decided to take them off and toss them in the trash. Despite that, she remembered that Lee had booked a night at Hotel M to enjoy the stay and had left everything ready for her to take advantage of. One night, plus a free cocktail without any refund, though she was still worried because she had to work the next day. It was quite the conflict. As she headed to the hotel, Kang paused to admire the place, realizing she had worked a lot in the past few months and didn't know when she would have the chance to enjoy a place like this again. She had also dressed up just for this day. At the very least, she could enjoy this night as Kang. Meanwhile, Asiop was drinking with his elementary school friends and chatting about various things as he sipped on wine. One of them asked why he still wasn't dating, surprising Isiop because they had brought up the topic so suddenly. The friend laughed, saying there wouldn't be another opportunity to talk about it, and they asked if Isiop planned to stay single forever, making him freeze. As the others commented that he didn't have a potential marriage partner, maybe the daughter of some professor. However, Isiop asked why they were all so interested in his personal life at this point. There must be something more interesting than the life of an heir in his 30s with zero dating experience. This made them all laugh at Isiop, toasting and wishing him luck to finally find a girlfriend. Despite Isiop's embarrassment, he watched as they opened a bottle of champagne and toasted together. They seemed more excited than Isiop himself about the idea of him dating and getting married at this age. He simply decided to take another sip of his drink until he began hearing footsteps in the hallway that gave him a familiar chill. When he looked up, he saw Kang walking nearby, completely capturing his attention. She walked right past him, but Isiop instantly recognized her as Kang because of her distinct footsteps. Even so, he felt like he was losing his mind, seeing Kang in a place like this so suddenly. He grabbed his phone, thinking he should send her a message, and then he wrote a few texts. This made Kang pick up her phone and read them, surprising Isiop again because it was really her in front of him. A few days ago, he remembered complaining to Kim about Kang's terrible phone charm, featuring a ridiculous character that looked like an onion. She had to be the only one with such a bad phone charm, and Kang responded to the messages, saying she would be at his apartment the next day. As soon as Kang touched her phone, Isiop received an immediate reply, still making him sweat in shock. He could hardly believe that Kang was this stunning woman on the other side of the room, and his friends quickly noticed that he was staring at someone. Pointing to the woman across the way who looked like a model, they teased Isiop, saying he seemed interested in her, laughing that it must be love at first sight. Isiop told them to shut up, saying the woman just looked like someone he knew. Meanwhile, Kang sat down to look at the menu, remembering Jung mentioning that the bar was famous for its cocktail. Thinking that it sounded delicious, she decided to try the drink, buying it and figuring she could handle the alcohol. After all, she was staying at the hotel, so she could just enjoy the night a little, sipping the cocktail while listening to the music playing in the lounge, watching the night outside the window as she sat alone at the table, smiling at her own reflection as she felt quite good about herself that evening. That's when she was caught off guard by Jung showing up again, nervously laughing as he said he went to get a drink and thought he'd like to see her again. The compliments made the protagonist nervous because she had already ordered a drink, and it was strange since she couldn't drink much more than that. Still, Jung sat down with her to chat at the table, and Iseop noticed this from across the room, wondering what was happening. It didn't seem like the man was Kang's boyfriend based on how they were acting, and meanwhile, Jung ordered more drinks. The Purple Rain, which women liked for its great fragrance, and the Sunset, which had a base of deep, sweet whiskey, serving them all so Kang could drink and enjoy, filling the table with alcohol. Jung mentioned that he really wanted to buy those drinks for her, revealing that he had read all the columns she had published. She always wrote that she loved cocktails, usually ordering at least 3 at bars, which made the protagonist break into a cold sweat because she had completely forgotten that Lee loved to drink. It would be better to just drink them quickly and leave, but to her dismay, Jung kept talking while she drank. Excited because he had studied all night just to go out with Lee, not knowing that Kang was actually having trouble drinking the strong cocktails. That's when Jung got a call from Hyeon, stepping out to say that he was with Lee now, laughing because Hyeon seemed worried about his sister. Not only that, but he was also at the hotel and on his way there, even though Jung was about to take her home. The conversation made Kang anxious, realizing she needed to find a way to leave before Hyeon arrived and discovered the truth. Jung returned to the table and apologized, saying it was rude of him to take the call and leave her aside. Noticing she still had a drink, he suggested they enjoy it slowly while chatting, and Kang thought that if this was the last one, she needed to finish it quickly. Seeing her drink so much made Jung laugh, commenting that she was really good at drinking, as expected, but soon she found herself starting to feel the effects of the alcohol. Everything seemed to sway in her vision, worrying Jung as she began to feel dizzy. The protagonist stood up, saying she was going to leave, but Jung mentioned that Hyeon was on his way and they could wait for him. She wanted to get to her room as quickly as possible. It was bad because, despite wanting to leave, Jung kept insisting she sit back down. Seeing the scene, Iseop approached them and questioned why Jung was trying to stop someone from leaving like that. This made Jung break into a cold sweat and stammer that it wasn't what it looked like, that Iseop had misunderstood, which made Kang feel that the voice was familiar to her. But she couldn't recognize his face because she was too drunk. Everything felt too stuffy, and she wasn't feeling well. Iseop said he had been sitting nearby and saw everything, noticing how Jung had joined her even though she clearly didn't want to be there. And he was forcing her to drink, so Iseop asked what Jung's real intentions were. Jung defended himself, saying nothing had happened, and even wanted to show his card. But Iseop was caught off guard when Kang stumbled and leaned against his chest, making her look up at his face more closely. As he woke up the next morning in bed, at least remembering that he had met Kang the night before, he went to the bathroom to wash his face and wake up, wondering what had happened, the closeness catching him off guard and making him blush, causing him to look away. Then he took off his jacket and covered her with it, making sure to hide her skin, even though Kang was still confused and searching for her briefing document. It seemed to Iseop that she wasn't in her right mind, and Kang apologized while suddenly looking for the document. This made Iseop wonder how much Jung had made her drink that night, and Jung stammered that he hadn't done anything, explaining they were on a date with a view to a future marriage, showing his business card, and promising that he wasn't a suspicious or strange guy, surprising Iseop because she was really on a date. Jung accused Iseop of being rude for intruding like that, to which Iseop asked who he was to say that. Iseop replied that he was a colleague of Kang's, crumpling Jung's business card while staring him down. Kang stammered, wanting to explain, accidentally dropping the jacket, and Iseop bent down to pick it up, sighing for her to compose herself a little. Then he was once again caught off guard when Kang also bent down to pick up the jacket, exposing more of her body than she should have. This made him blush even more as he wrapped her body in the jacket, yelling at her to cover up properly. He wondered why she had drunk so much to the point of being so careless, not even aware of what she was doing. At that moment, Jung asked who exactly Kang was and what colleague Iseop was talking about. Then suddenly, Hyeon appeared, answering that she was Lee's best friend and his roommate. Jung was caught off guard by everything that had happened, and the conversation between the two made him bid farewell and leave everything in Hyeon's hands. Meanwhile, Iseop wondered who this man was who had appeared so suddenly, but Hyeon approached the executive director. Bowing to apologize for the commotion, he explained that he had been assigned as a legal consultant for TK Corporation, but hadn't expected to meet Iseop like this. When Kang looked up, it took her a moment to recognize Hyeon, freezing as she wondered what exactly he was doing there. Then she remembered that she could be in trouble if she got caught, though she hadn't realized she'd already been caught in the act. With that, the protagonist turned to hide behind Iseop, grabbing his hand in a way that made him blush again. He wondered what was happening now, but noticed that Kang seemed as nervous as the last time. Hyeon smiled, noticing that Kang was too drunk, but said he would take care of her from now on and take her home. However, Iseup interrupted, saying she was his employee and that he couldn't hand her over to a stranger just like that. He asked what the relationship between them was, to which Hyeon replied that they had been close friends since they were young, so there was no need to worry. He reached out to bring Kang closer, promising he wouldn't say anything to Lee about what happened and that everything would be fine. He reminded Kang that she knew she shouldn't drink so much, making her laugh as she said it had been about 3 cocktails followed by champagne. It was an expression that left Iseup speechless. He had never seen her make that kind of face or smile before. Once again, Hyeon apologized to Iseup for all the trouble, saying he could introduce himself formally next time. With that, he took the jacket off the protagonist to hand it back to Iseup, but Iseup interrupted. He covered her again, this time properly, buttoning the jacket to ensure Kang was fully covered while she just watched. Iseup said they should bring her back tomorrow, but Kang said nothing as Hyeon placed his hand on her shoulder, thanking him for taking care of the protagonist. He pulled her close so they could leave, which irritated Iseup in a way he didn't expect. But Kang refused, saying she wasn't going home because she wanted to stay and have fun that night, laughing a little. Hyeon agreed, saying he would take her to her room, surprising Iseup because he hadn't expected him to take her to the hotel. Iseup grabbed Hyeon's arm, questioning why he was taking a drunk girl to a hotel room. It was far too strange. After a moment of hesitation, Hyeon asked if Iseup thought it would be better for him to take her himself. After all, it wasn't like they were dating for him to defend her like this. The next morning, when Iseup woke up, he wondered if his encounter with Kang at the bar had been a dream or reality. He got up to wash his face in the bathroom, still wondering what had happened after she and Hyeon had left. Supposedly, Hyeon, a close friend, had walked her to her hotel room, and Iseup could still remember Hyeon smiling as he said Iseup was being hypocritical. As he dressed, Iseup tried to convince himself that none of this was his business, ready to head to work. When they met in the car with Kim, Kang smiled as she greeted him, and he hesitated before acknowledging her. Seeing her like this made Iseup think that it must have been a good night for Kang. She didn't even have a hangover. Moreover, she didn't seem to have any trouble looking at him, but Iseup didn't want to look at Kang's face or hear her voice. It was annoying, but he didn't even know why he was always irritated by the protagonist's presence. When they arrived at the office, time passed until lunchtime, when Kang appeared to report that the food was ready. After a moment of silence, he responded that he wasn't hungry and turned his face away, also asking her to cancel all afternoon meetings because he wasn't feeling well. Kang agreed, leaving the office while thinking that she needed to return the jacket to Iseup somehow. She cringed, feeling like she was losing her mind after everything she did the night before, blushing as she wondered if she should pretend she didn't remember, or if she should face it and apologize, but it seemed like her boss didn't want to see her that day. It was both worrying and understandable, making her even more embarrassed than before. It was a distance that left both of them tense. Later, Iseup got into Kim's car, asking just to drive around for a bit, and as he rested his head against the window, he sighed. Kim said he would take him toward the river, suggesting that it might be good to get some fresh air through the window while they drove. This caught Iseup's attention, making him ask if he looked unwell, to which Kim responded that he always called when something was on his mind. That's why Kim thought about where he could take him to help him relax, making Iseup pause and think about how quickly the manager understood things. Then Kim mentioned that it was Kang who had told him there was nothing better than running along the Han River when something was weighing on your mind. This surprised Iseup, learning that Kang ran, and Kim confirmed it, revealing that Kang enjoyed exercising for fun, running 10 kilometers every time she went out. In addition, she found time to work out even with her busy schedule, which made Iseup feel impressed. It took him a moment to realize he was blushing, and he shouted at Kim to drive more quietly because he was talking too much, making Kim apologize. Later that evening, Iseup ended up joining a family dinner at home, catching his younger sister, Sujin-tae, by surprise. This made Iseup comment that, based on how she spoke, it seemed like he was the only one who was always disappearing, and he questioned what Junsup was doing in Songbakche. Junsup replied that he and Wookyong were engaged, so he wanted to see President Tai to discuss a few things. Sujin explained in surprise and praised Junsup for being engaged, telling Iseup that it was wonderful news. They had even appeared on magazine covers, which she thought was very romantic, but to Iseup, it all seemed like cliché romantic nonsense. Sighing, his sister felt sorry for him because Iseup had worked his whole life and had never dated, which pained her. That made him tense up, and he glared at her, asking if she was trying to irritate him, and she laughed, saying she was just worried about him. He got up to get some fresh air, but before leaving, he said he wanted to talk to Junsup outside. The two went out to the garden, and Junsup opened a beer, commenting that it was a warm night. Iseup was startled to see him not only start drinking, but almost down the beer in one gulp, to the point where it spilled down his neck. This made Iseop think Junseop was a fool. It was obvious his throat must have burned after that. Then Junseop mentioned that Sujin had told him women found it sexy to drink like that, but Iseop couldn't believe it. In any case, he got straight to the point, saying he had something to discuss with Junseop about manager Kang. He wanted him to take her back on his team. Immediately, Junseop smiled and refused his request, surprising Iseop because he didn't even ask why. Junseop replied that they had hired excellent staff and Kang was someone who did an incredible job, so there was no reason to bring her back to his team. Iseop looked away and said that Junseop should know Kang was too good to be just a secretary, which made Junseop smile because she was perfect for the job. But Junseop wanted to know if there was some other issue with Kang that Iseop wasn't telling him, which made Iseop go silent. The next morning, Sujin burst into her brother's room, shouting and calling him over to show him the news, photos of him with Kang, suggesting they were having an affair. She smiled and asked what that was all about, but Iseop didn't even know what was happening as Sujin told him he had been caught with an unknown woman. Known for staying out of the public eye, Iseop had suddenly been seen in a hotel bar with a woman who wasn't a celebrity. Pressing her brother even more with a big grin, she asked woman was, forcing him to sit down. But before he could say anything, Sujin decided to guess that it was manager Kang, making Iseop blush and ask how she knew. Sujin burst out laughing, saying she didn't know. She had just taken a guess and hit the mark, but she was surprised because she never thought she'd see her brother with a woman in his arms. He didn't even like people touching him, so it was unbelievable that something like this had happened, leading her to guess that it might be the start of an office romance. Iseop denied it, saying it wasn't true, though Sujin insisted otherwise, reminding him that he needed some romance in his life too. That's why she pressed him to know if he was interested in anyone. He had to find someone to date, flirt with, and everything else. When her brother kept denying it, Sujin theorized that he might seriously be considering an arranged marriage with her. An arranged marriage that, as their parents said, would bring harmony between the TK and Choi families and establish him as the rightful heir. Sujin asked if that was why he had never slept with anyone before, making Iseop shout again that it wasn't anything like that. Shrinking back, he said he had no interest in an arranged marriage, but that didn't mean he wanted to date just anyone. Blushing, Iseop stammered that he would date someone he fell in love with at first sight, making his sister laugh even harder at the scene. Still teasing Iseop, Sujin called him the most sensitive man in the world, with a pure heart and everything, despite him trying to hide it. The two argued for a long time until Sujin winked, wishing luck for Iseop's romance and thanking him for her allowance, as always. After she left, Iseop was left alone, still blushing with embarrassment from all his sister's teasing. The next day, Kang apologized to Iseop for the inconvenience she had caused in his personal life the other night. Her formality made Iseop a little nervous, and he responded awkwardly that there wasn't anything to apologize for. It was his mistake for getting involved in her personal matters. However, the protagonist disagreed, saying that as his secretary, she failed to prevent something ridiculous, false, and cowardly from happening, so it was entirely her fault. She was serious about doing everything in her power to ensure nothing would tarnish his status as an executive director after that article went live. That's why she bowed several times, clearly embarrassed, even though Iseop assured her that everything was fine. He changed the subject to the meeting scheduled with a construction company, and he got ready to leave while she went to prepare the car. The two took the elevator down, and Iseop wondered if what had happened really warranted such repeated apologies. Deep down, it seemed that for Kang, everything was just part of the job, simply another matter she needed to handle. She was just doing her job as a secretary, which made him question what exactly he had been expecting. When they stepped out of the elevator, they were suddenly met by a swarm of photographers flashing their cameras at them. The sudden attention made Iseop freeze, his heart racing with nervousness, anxiety, and discomfort. Kang quickly noticed this and rushed to wake him from his shock, grabbing his shoulders when she saw him stumble and cover his face. She became worried as he turned pale and started gasping for air, trembling badly in the midst of a panic attack that made him feel like throwing up. This made her tense too. Of all times, this had to happen right now. That's when Kim appeared, speeding toward them with the car and yelling for them to get in quickly, which they did. The car sped away from the building, with Kang still trying to calm Iseop, asking if he was okay. He could barely breathe, so she urged him to at least try, though her voice seemed to grow more distant. It didn't take long for Iseop to pass out in her arms, still sweating heavily after the panic attack. In his memories, Iseop could recall when, as a child, TK had been passed down to him, and the entire world had its eyes on him. That's why, throughout his life, he had been haunted by the flashes of cameras blinding his eyes. Pictures were taken of him every day, with no sense of privacy or space to live his own life. He was ordered to always behave, never to let his guard down. He was the face of TK, the future of the company. The bright lights had always made him anxious and nervous ever since he was a child, and this time was no different. Unconscious, he could hear a voice calling his name repeatedly until he finally woke up with a start. Sitting up slowly in bed, he sighed as he realized that he had fainted and ended up in the hospital. Even though he thought he had gotten better, it seemed he was still struggling, which reminded him of how scared and worried Kang had been. He noticed her sitting on a nearby couch, fast asleep after spending her time there with him. This made him wonder if Kang had stayed by his side the entire time, even staying so late, and she surely must have been exhausted. It wasn't long before Kang woke up too, startled when she realized Isiop had gotten up. She helped him sit back down, warning him that he shouldn't get up yet and needed to rest, though he insisted he was fine. Isiop told her to go home now because she must be tired, but the protagonist refused, saying it was her fault for not taking care of his health, so she would stay. After all, he had been skipping his meals lately, and she would make sure he ate well before she left. That startled Isiop. She was acting like he was a child, but she didn't mind and went off to get him something to eat. Kang knew the meal probably wasn't to his taste, but he had to eat everything, which made him grimace. She told him that she had ensured everything that happened that day remained confidential, so there was nothing to worry about. Slowly, he thanked her, and then he heard her stomach growling, which made Isiop chuckle a little while she blushed with embarrassment. He asked her to go out and get dinner now because he wouldn't eat until she returned with something for herself to eat. When the two sat down to eat, Isiop commented that he had thought she was a robot, but now he could see her messy hair and the fact that she was eating too. It seemed she had a human side as well, which made her reply that she would fix it, though Isiop quickly explained that it wasn't a criticism, just an observation. Slowly, he started to share that the first time he fainted was when he was 20 years old. His father had always been very demanding, and ever since he was young, he was told he had to be perfect and composed all the time. Reporters followed him, always trying to find something to write about, so his father wanted him to be cautious, and he always was. So, Isiop lived with constant anxiety, never taking the risk of tarnishing the company's image because of something he said or did. The reporters were constantly following him, waiting for any mistake, bombarding him with blinding flashes from their cameras. At one point, he thought he would get used to the flashes, but even as time passed, that never happened. One day, during a family photo session, a flash went off right in front of his eyes, and suddenly he collapsed, fainting on the spot. After telling this story, he gestured and smiled at Kang, suggesting that they should rest for a while. Isiop felt a little embarrassed for talking so much and asked her to continue eating, which made her fall silent. She thought that Isiop had been through much more than she had ever imagined before. Sometime later, she said she would return at 8 a.m. with the preparations for the morning's video conference. This made Isiop check his watch, commenting that it was already too late, and it seemed too early to do this the next day. Kang replied that the schedule had been pushed back the day before, so it would be difficult to reschedule. The documents were all ready, so there was nothing to worry about. But before she could leave, he mentioned that there were only a few hours until the meeting, so she might as well sleep there. However, even he didn't know what he was thinking when he suggested that, leaving the protagonist confused, and he quickly gestured for her to go. He was still blushing when he watched her leave, holding his head, and wondering if he had hit it when he fainted or something. The next day, he woke up still feeling tired, even though he had slept well, barely finishing a yawn when he heard Kang knocking on the door. She appeared smiling and guided him to the day's meeting as planned. Isiop watched her, thinking it was impressive because, even though Kang was surely tired, she didn't show it. She seemed the same as always, while Isiop didn't feel that way at all. He ended up saying a lot of unnecessary things the day before, even though it wasn't like him to be so emotional. When Kang finished, she informed him that the morning meetings had been rescheduled, clearing his agenda for the rest of the day to allow for his recovery. At this, he stammered out a thank you, and not long after, he received a visit from Sujin, who had heard he was off for the day. She arrived to deliver a bouquet of flowers, under orders from their mother, who insisted on visiting him since he was in the hospital. Hearing that his mother knew about it made Isiop freeze, and his sister nodded, explaining that she had gone to Busan to get medicinal herbs. As the two conversed, the protagonist smiled, noticing how close Isiop was to his family. When Sujin approached to greet her, Kang greeted her formally, and Sujin remarked that she had seen her before at the employee competitions, praising her for finishing first. Beside them, Isiop crossed his arms and told Sujin to leave now that she had done what she came for. But his sister refused and pulled him aside, whispering that she would help him, or maybe she would just spill a secret, leaving him confused. Still, Sujin approached Kang again, smiling and suggesting they go out for coffee, leaving Isiop alone in the room. The two walked down the streets with coffee in hand, and Sujin commented that Kang must have been shocked the previous day. The protagonist agreed, saying she never expected to see him faint like that, but it was a relief to see him better today. Still, Sujin added that seeing Isiop faint wasn't uncommon. She had never actually seen her brother relax. Since they were young, their parents had always expected Isiop to become the perfect successor and role model. Their father was an ambitious man, but lacked the skills to achieve his goals, which led him to fall out of favor with their grandfather, Suwon. To regain his position at TK, he began using his eldest son, Isiop, who always worked hard to meet expectations and earn recognition. When Isiop turned 20, that's when Junkang appeared, now also known as Junseop Ta. Sujin commented that Kang probably knew Junseop's story, and Kang remembered that it made a lot of headlines at the time. Siwon Tae's youngest daughter, Seohee Ta, had fallen in love with a volleyball player, ran away to America, and disappeared. No one heard from her for 20 years, until the existence of her son was revealed after her death. After the aunt who had been hiding in America passed away from leukemia, Junseop had nowhere to go, so Suwon accepted him as his grandson. That's how he received his current name, and for Isiop, who considered himself the only heir, it was like a sudden threat appearing. So, he worked hard for 20 years to avoid losing to Junseop, up until recently, when their father's mistake handed half of the company to Junseop's side. For Isiop, it must have felt like his whole world had turned upside down. This made the protagonist realize she had always jumped to conclusions about Isiop, thinking of him only as a spoiled heir. At that point, Sujin said that her brother hadn't even had a chance to rest before starting to work, and he was under immense stress. That's why she was relieved that Kang was by Isiop's side now, and she looked at her expectantly, as if wanting to call her by her first name. The protagonist agreed, thinking that it was such a sad story that it even reminded her of her own twin brothers. That's when Sujin hugged Kang, whining that her brother was an idiot who didn't know how to relax and was still working while in the hospital. Still crying, she asked what they could do to get Isiop to loosen up and relax a bit, which made the protagonist hesitate, as she had a weakness for women's tears. Determined to find a way to fix the situation, Kang resolved to help, which made Sujin celebrate, knowing she had achieved her goal. As they left the hospital, with everyone in the car, Kim confidently stated that he was an expert in travel and that they could leave everything in his hands. Isiop didn't understand why they were suddenly traveling to Gangwon, despite Sujin's pleased smile. At this, the protagonist said that proper rest was excellent for recovery, as well as improving productivity and creativity, which would benefit his work. That's why she wanted to help him rest, which made Isiop hesitate before agreeing, looking away as he muttered that he only needed a few days of sleep and that a trip was over the top. Still, Kang smiled because, despite his complaints, he seemed quite excited from her point of view. This made her feel a bit sorry for Isiop, thinking that he must have worked way too hard for him to end up in this situation. That's why she was now determined to make sure he, and she herself, enjoyed this trip together. Driver Kim had gone through various stages in his life, from elementary to secondary school and high school, serving as the president of the entertainment club. He had been a representative at Jongdaeun University in the automotive engineering department, the president of a self-made automotive club, and much more. The protagonist recognized his efforts and everything he had accomplished throughout his life, which is why she chose him as the driver for this trip. He had even booked excellent accommodations, prompting Kang to thank him for organizing the itinerary for everyone. Isiop was confused by how far they were traveling, and Sujin laughed, saying the fewer people around, the better, eagerly anticipating the future events. They headed to the Jeom Sok Pension in the Jayu Aremdon Hills at the Healing Pension of Freedom, a nearly 5-star location. People always said it was one of the best accommodations in the area, offering a beautiful view of nature. Another reviewer mentioned it was a perfect family trip, ideal for relaxation, and they thanked the place for providing everything in advance. They had reserved the highest-rated room, and even Kim was impressed because the accommodations looked exactly like the photos. He presented the girls' room and the identical one for the men, pointing out how spacious it was, with the beautiful natural scenery as a bonus. A bit taken aback, Isiop asked if the 4 of them were really going to sleep there, and Kim agreed, saying the room was indeed large enough for 4 people. They then started unpacking from the trip. During the process, Isiop thought it was a bit strange to share a room, as he couldn't handle the idea of sleeping with someone close by, thinking he wouldn't be able to rest properly like that. Meanwhile, in the girls' room, Sujin was surprised that Kang had brought so few things for the trip, and she explained that she had made sure to pack just enough to be comfortable. In fact, even Sujin noticed that Kang probably didn't take vacations often, which is why it was necessary to make this trip feel like one. A little later, Kim asked if the girls were ready, and they agreed, prepared to head out and explore the area. They came down the stairs from the girls' room, and Isiop noticed that Kang had changed into a different outfit for the outing, making him blush as he asked his sister why they were dressed like that, to which she cheerfully replied it was because they were on vacation. Whispering that Kang had an amazing figure, this made Isiop even more nervous as Kim led Kang toward the entrance where the car was parked. Sujin suggested that they could split into groups since they had limited time. She could go shopping with driver Kim, leaving Kang and Icy-up to explore together to see if they could find anything fun nearby. With that, they waved and laughed before heading off, leaving the two of them alone near the hotel building. Kang said she would return after exploring the area, and Icy-up added that they could go together to do that. The two walked through a forest, and Kang asked if he had mentioned before that he liked this path, to which Icy-up replied that he didn't know because he hadn't been to places like this often. The protagonist said that when she was younger, there used to be a mountain like this near her home, and it became her and her friend's favorite park. They would go to the mountains together, look at the flowers, catch insects, and play under the summer sun. The smell of that forest brought back those memories, and Icy-up agreed that it seemed like a nice memory. That's when the protagonist pointed to a tree full of ripe forest raspberries, known for the shape of their fruit. Kang approached to eat them, which worried Icy-up, who asked if it was really safe to eat something like that so suddenly. She reassured him it was fine, saying they were sweet and delicious, smiling as she offered him one to try as well. So he opened his mouth and accepted the fruit she gave him, chewing slowly until he complained, because the raspberry was actually bitter and sour, and Kang realized that some of the berries weren't ripe yet. The two continued walking for some time, admiring the scenery together, enjoying the river, the beauty of the flowers, and all the nature around them. When Kang offered him a flower, she thought that she had never seen Icy-up looking so calm and relaxed before. This made her happy because he really seemed to be enjoying his time there. It was a relief for both of them. A little later, they sat down on the grass, and Kang started mentioning something the executive director had said before, the idea of relaxing his shoulders and living a little, and she thought this might be a good moment for them to rest. That's why Kang was happy when he agreed to this trip, which made Icy-up blush and look away, admitting that he had never been to a place like this before, but now he was enjoying it, until they noticed it had started raining. They got up and tried to cover themselves to escape the rain. Icy-up suggested they head back, so the two began running from the rain, but the ground was slippery. He warned Kang to be careful as they walked, watching as she climbed over a rock. He grabbed her hand just in time when she slipped, surprising her with his quick reflexes. At the same time, Icy-up asked her to hold his hand, and Kang thanked him, agreeing with his suggestion. Icy-up felt like he was going crazy. Although it wasn't summer, he wondered why there was such heavy rain. They stopped running near a station, sitting on a bench, their bodies completely soaked. He looked at Kang for a moment before wringing out his jacket, which was drenched, and placing it over her shoulders. He told her that the assistant manager would be there soon, so Kang should use the jacket to stay warm until then. But looking more closely at Icy-up, Kang replied that he seemed to need it more than she did. This made her ask if he was alright, noticing how soaked he looked as she reached out a hand toward him. This made Icy-up blush, stammering as he pulled away, saying he was fine, just feeling a little warm from running. Still, the protagonist noticed that his face was completely red, and she asked for permission to check his forehead, placing her hand on it. She thought he might have a fever, and that they would have a problem if he caught a cold, but Icy-up pulled away again. He tried to deny her concerns, but he could feel something was wrong, to the point where he felt nauseous. That's when Kim and Sujin arrived with the car, shocked to see the two of them drenched from the rain, and told them to get in. After they got in, they commented that the rain had come out of nowhere, even though it wasn't in the weather forecast, so it was understandable they had been surprised. During the car ride, they hit a bump, and Kang and Icy-up's knees accidentally touched, making Icy-up blush as he turned to look out the window. But Kang didn't even notice, focused on her conversation with Kim and Sujin as they continued down the road. Back at the building, the four of them gathered to prepare something for dinner, and Icy-up watched Kang from a distance. They all worked together to make a barbecue to enjoy their time, but Icy-up couldn't stop watching Kang smile the entire time. Later that night, he went outside to be alone for a while, looking at the remnants of the flower he had kept from the forest. Suddenly, Kang called out to him, making him quickly hide the flower in his pocket as he saw her approach. She said she had been looking for him and asked why he was out there alone. Icy-up responded that he just wanted some fresh air. The two sat down, and Kang confessed that she had really enjoyed the day. Perhaps she hadn't realized it because she had been working non-stop. But now that they were all having fun together, she felt like she was finally moving forward without having to look back. After a moment of silence, Icy-up agreed that he had been living intensely, and now he felt like he was holding her back as well. This made her smile, replying that it wasn't true, explaining that ever since she was young, she had excelled at everything because she was smart. That's why she had always done well in school. Even when she had to work after graduating from high school due to her financial situation, she thought everything would work out. In response, Icy-up smiled and agreed that she had done a good job, and Kang continued, saying that she could do well as his assistant. She added that until he reached the top of TK Group, she would be by his side and work hard to support him in any way she could, delivering great results. Kang's determination made Isiop blush a little, timidly agreeing again, asking her to do just that. Then, shortly after, one of their phones started vibrating with a call, and Kang realized it was hers. She excused herself to take the call. Isiop told her it was fine, letting her step away to answer, realizing it was Hyun on the line. They talked, and she explained that she was at work, attending a workshop with her colleagues from the company. When they returned to the company, no one could help but notice that Isiop had a slight smile hidden behind his usual cold demeanor. Sharp comments were wrapped in a gentle voice, revealing an inherent arrogance that not even his manners and rigid posture could conceal. The distinct traits of someone who had been in power all their life. This was the crown prince of the TK group. As she followed Isiop, Kang began informing him of his schedule, reporting that he had a dinner scheduled with Kim Hong-hoo, the CEO of Company N, at 5 p.m. After the dinner, there was a spa service booked for 8 p.m., and he agreed with everything she reported. Kang felt that Isiop was acting like a completely different person since they returned from their rest trip. Now, he was 10 times colder than the Isiop of the past, making her wonder if everything she saw back then was just her imagination. Deep down, she felt that Isiop had always been this way, but for some reason, he was acting more distant now. The two spent time together, even inside the car, and Isiop would sometimes glance at Kang when she was distracted. He would quickly turn his head away when she started talking, ready to go over his schedule, and he agreed, almost startled, that she had almost caught him spying on her. The protagonist mentioned that he had a business report at the headquarters at 10 a.m. and lunch with Lee Jong-wook, the CEO of Corporation E, at noon. And so she continued, making Isiop feel that, as always, she was working hard. This reminded him of how she had mentioned in that call that she was just working during the trip. It made him think that if she liked work so much, he would let her do it endlessly, without hesitation. At one point, Isiop went to Kang's desk and handed over several documents, asking her to organize everything before the next day's meeting. She immediately agreed, but when she finished, he commented that the legibility wasn't great and asked her to reorganize it and bring it back. Even so, he later asked her to revert to the original because it was better than what she had done. And again, Kang just agreed to his requests. Despite the mountain of tasks he had assigned her the previous week, her tone and attitude remained unchanged. Isiop knew she hadn't changed since the last time they had seen each other, but that was frustrating him. One evening, Kang knocked on his office door to let him know that dinner was ready. This time, it was mushroom risotto from Restaurant F and a wheatgrass juice. She thought it would be more convenient for him to eat this instead of his usual salad, making Isiop realize that it was his favorite dish when he dined at restaurants. It was perfect, as expected, but even so, he took a bite before dismissing her meal. He said that if it was to her taste, she should eat it, and also, he didn't drink things like wheatgrass juice. Although she was initially disappointed, she smiled politely and informed him that, as a precaution, she had prepared other dishes for him. This time, it was an abalone porridge specially ordered from Hotel L, and she wished him a good meal. Despite feeling almost furious because it was delicious, Isiop was irritated precisely because it tasted so good. A little later, he stopped by Kang's office, and she asked if he was leaving now because the car was already waiting for him. Then, Isiop was surprised to find that she had actually eaten the previous meal. When he asked why, she responded that he had told her to eat it, although he clarified that he hadn't meant it literally. Kang asked if he wanted to eat it again and if she should order more, which made him shout in denial, saying he had already eaten the porridge. Sighing, Isiop asked if she did these things on purpose to show off, but she elegantly denied it, saying she was only eating there to save time. Because she still had a lot of work to finish that day, Isiop sighed again, asking if she was really okay with eating that. This made her hesitate before responding that she had washed the spoon, so there was nothing to worry about, making Isiop feel like he was losing his mind. He grabbed her juice and drank it all, making her stammer that she had already started drinking from that glass. But he couldn't have cared less as he wiped his mouth after drinking, saying it had originally been his. If she intended to drink it, she could just order another one, which made Kang fall silent. Then he pointed to her computer screen, saying she had done a good job organizing the slides. He complimented her performance. After that, he left the room, and when he was alone, he started laughing to himself, still blushing. Remembering how tense Kang had become when he whispered in her ear, he hoped she had felt something from it. He had seen Kang blush that time, thinking she looked great like that, which made him smile non-stop. Time passed normally at work until one day, Isiop couldn't avoid feeling tense. When Kang called him, they headed to the meeting room, where she apologized to those present, asking if they had been waiting long. Seated at the table, the legal representative from MP, Min Ji-hoo, greeted the executive director with a smile, and introduced himself as the legal advisor for the FA case concerning the Baikyang resort. Next to Min was also Hyeon, another lawyer who accompanied him. Hyeseop recognized him immediately and greeted him. It was problematic because this unlucky guy was starting at TK this time, Hyeseop thought as he shook hands with Min. The negotiation for the TK group's merger and acquisition project for the resort, which was steadily progressing, was now in full swing. A task force had been established in the resort business division by FA, but Hyeseop wondered why. Out of all the firms, they had to send Hyeon. Looking at him made Hyeseop clearly uncomfortable, though he had been the one to choose the firm in the first place. As time went on with work continuing, Kang felt that they had a heavy workload after that brief, lovely trip. From the busy secretary's tasks to assisting the FT team, she had become so consumed with work that she barely noticed the time passing. Moreover, for some unknown reason, Hyeseop had been treating her harshly for some time. Thinking about it made her feel like it was quite childish on his part, but it wasn't something she couldn't handle. Meanwhile, Hyeseop was taking care of his own tasks, still thinking about his interactions with Kang. He noticed she seemed a bit exhausted lately, which made him wonder if he had been too hard on her. But he shook his head, reminding himself that he was the boss, and it was natural to assign tasks to employees. Maybe he was just overthinking it again. When he went to Kang's office, he wondered where she had gone because he couldn't find her around. Approaching her desk, he noticed there was a large amount of stuff piled up, and it seemed like she wasn't even managing to eat properly. This made him mentally complain. If Kang was having trouble, she could have just said so from the beginning. Hyeseop decided to go to the area where the employees were, surprising them by showing up there. But he reassured them it was nothing serious, explaining that he was just passing through. The men commented that his attention to detail was boosting team morale. They had received several messages through Secretary Kang recently. They remarked that the secretary was especially exceptional, always knowing everything. Surely, she must be quite busy with her personal life too. Still, it was impressive how she managed to handle things so quickly, and Hyeseop agreed, thinking the same as they did. She was always doing an excellent job as his secretary, so he asked where she was now. They replied that she was likely with the FT team, prompting him to quickly turn and head in that direction without hesitation. Wondering why she was with them at that time, he walked to the room where she was supposed to be. Inside, Kang was working on her computer, talking to Hyeon and Min beside her, which irritated Hyeseop. From a distance, he watched, wondering when they had become so close, unable to stop himself from mentally cursing. He then opened the door, catching everyone by surprise, prompting Kang to ask what had brought him there so suddenly. Smiling, Hyeseop commented that she looked busy, and she nervously replied that she was finishing up delivering the documents. Hyeon interrupted, expressing his gratitude, saying he had requested the documents earlier at the office, and Kang had delivered an impeccable report. Even the auditors were impressed when they saw it, and it was all thanks to her that they received such assistance. Hyeseop continued by stating that she was indeed very competent, probably too busy now to handle such matters. He asked if she had compiled a construction contract status for the overseas project and about the progress of the expansion project in Saudi Arabia. Kang replied that the data was organized and the relevant department was gathering the expansion statuses. It would all be ready by 3 p.m. This led Hyeseop to question if she didn't know her priorities, and she promised to correct that. Hyeseop then approached Hyeon, reminding him that the data should have been organized by him, since that was the reason he was hired. He also asked if the executive director's secretary of TK's business department was his friend or something like that. Hesitating, Hyeon apologized, saying his lack of attention had caused issues with the work, and Hyeseop agreed that was indeed the case. As Hyeseop was leaving, he asked if Kang wasn't going to accompany him, and she agreed that she would. The two left while Hyeseop wished everyone a good continuation of their work, still with that smile that made everyone tense. He also ordered them not to interfere with his secretary as he closed the door behind him, still glancing at everyone. That's when Kang's childhood memories began to resurface, about how she, Lee, and Hyeon were always together. Even Hyeon could remember how they ate raspberries in the forest, or how she had changed from the child she once was to the woman she had become. At the time, she had asked him when his enlistment would be, and Hyeon told her it would be in the first week of the following month. Kang was sad, saying she didn't think she could survive school without him, and he laughed, reassuring her that there was nothing to worry about. He promised he would return soon, and she should just wait a little longer, making Kang smile back, saying she would wait for him. Later, in the present, the protagonist felt exhausted because lunchtime had ended so quickly. The trip must have been effective because Hyeseop had been working tirelessly since then. Because of this, she had been so busy that she could barely tell day from night properly. But but that was better than Isiop avoiding his responsibilities like he used to before they had grown closer. At that moment, she felt hungry and decided to buy something simple to eat. Entering the convenience store, she was surprised because most of the workers from Office K couldn't have a proper meal and all the lunchboxes were sold out. Kang needed to eat to keep going, but there was nothing there to recharge her energy before returning to work. That's when she walked down the aisles and bent down to pick up a package of instant food that seemed perfect. Suddenly, Isiop appeared beside her, asking why she was crouching down, and the protagonist noticed him. He took the instant food from her hand, and although she said it was fine, he paid for the meal anyway. The two left the store, and Isiop invited her to sit and eat together, so they headed to the park. They sat on a bench, where Isiop opened a drink for himself, and the protagonist observed him from the corner of her eye. While drinking, Isiop noticed Kang watching him intensely, which made him blush slightly from the attention. This reminded him of how Junseop had once said that girls found it attractive when men drank in that exaggerated way. This made him give a slight smile, wondering if he had just unintentionally displayed such charm. He then commented that he had seen someone drink that way before and found it annoying, but it was quite refreshing when he tried it himself. The protagonist began to open the food she bought and asked if he had any trouble with digestion, and he hesitantly denied it. A bit frustrated by her lack of reaction, he noticed that she had bought a package of those snack bars she liked to eat since their training days in the past. She was surprised that Isiop remembered and offered one to him as well, which he took while looking away. He recalled during their training days when the protagonist had shown her favorite chocolate bar to the other students. She had said it had the best cost-benefit ratio, even when considering the cheap cost of 100 grams, and when factoring in the amount and the taste of the nuts, it was incomparable. Isiop remembered hearing her talk about that, and it seemed like she hadn't changed much from back then to the present. Just like before, the chocolate was still very sweet, and the caramel stuck to Isiop's mouth. Both in the past and now, it seemed like Isiop couldn't stop watching Kang, no matter what she was doing. Another day, the protagonist was heading to the elevator when Hyeon approached her. He laughed, saying he had finished his work much later, while Kang had left early. She agreed, saying she was almost done with her tasks for the day, and Hyeon smiled, noticing how hard she had been working lately. Reaching out, Hyeon touched her shoulder and noticed her heavy bag, to which Kang explained that her laptop was inside. Hyeon entered the elevator, mentioning that they could have dinner together since he knew some good restaurants nearby, and she agreed that it sounded great. He confessed that he had wanted to invite her to dinner after his first day working there, but she always seemed busy. This made the protagonist laugh as she apologized, and they continued talking while riding the elevator together. So, they went out to dinner at a restaurant, with Kang even shivering at how tasty the meat was. This made Hyeon laugh as he told her not to rush and to just enjoy the time to eat. The protagonist felt like she was in heaven in some way, and she even accepted the glass of water when he offered it to her. He asked her not to skip meals just because she was busy. She certainly looked tired. That said, he wanted her to keep serving herself and eat well while they were there. The two spent a good amount of time together, eating, chatting, and smiling at each other that night. A bit later, Hyeon was driving through the streets after dinner, with Kang sighing because she would have to go to work again the next day. She grumbled that she didn't want to go home, which made Hyeon nervous, asking what exactly she meant. Kang explained that if she went home, she would shower and sleep, and when she woke up, it would be morning, and again she would have to work. This made him laugh again, noting that she seemed like a complete workaholic at her job, but still had a lively social life. That made the protagonist sigh because he treated her like a little girl, even though she was an assistant at work. He agreed that she was right. It seemed like she had grown a lot since then, and she was very good at her job, to the point where Isiop always praised her. Kang apologized for what had happened last time. She hadn't expected the executive director to get so angry when she left his office. She assumed he was like that, but she hadn't imagined he would behave that way towards Hyeon, which made him chuckle nervously. Hesitating, Kang said it must have been something else because earlier he had asked her what kind of relationship she and Hyeon had. That's when she revealed that they were just childhood friends, but she immediately regretted saying that because Isiop had clearly gotten irritated. She knew he must have misunderstood the situation and thought Hyeon was helping her because of their long-standing friendship. She understood Isiop's point of view, but it didn't seem like something worth getting so angry about, especially because Isiop had been curious to know if anything had happened between her and Hyeon at the hotel that other day. Before, Hyeon had pushed Isiop away from Kang and guided her to the elevator, still holding her by the shoulder because she was too drunk to manage on her own. He had helped her walk to her room, commenting that she was in a complicated state, and Kang celebrated because the room was so nice. She jumped around like a happy child, feeling like she was on vacation, while Hyeon looked at her bed for a moment. That's when Kang tried to take off her coat, but couldn't unbutton it by herself. She asked for help, though Hyun was embarrassed, sighing because she was far too drunk. As he helped her, he remembered Up and questioned why Kang had drunk so much when she knew she had low tolerance. He scolded her, telling her she should know how dangerous it was to be that vulnerable. But she didn't see a problem and just pulled away, leaving Hyun frustrated as she sat down on the bed. He sighed and covered his face with his hands, muttering that it was far too dangerous to leave her alone like that. Now, when the protagonist asked Hyun if anything had happened at the hotel the day she drank, he reassured her that nothing had happened. This left her relieved, and Hyun chuckled nervously, agreeing that the executive director's personality was indeed peculiar. This made her laugh because it was true. The next day, Up had been very demanding with his food. As Kang complained about Up, Hyun remained silent while she spoke as he drove. But inside, he couldn't help but feel that Up was actually very annoying, even too much, in his opinion. Time passed for the protagonist, who returned to work well on a call around 7 in the evening. She said she'd be home in 30 minutes, with no overtime that day and ready to have dinner. She thought about grabbing some food on the way home and asked if they wanted Chinese food, as there were many good restaurants nearby. Then she noticed Up behind her with an intense look, and the protagonist stammered, saying she thought he had already gone home. This made him smile as he explained that he'd be staying late at the office that day, surprising her. He said he should have mentioned it earlier because he needed to coordinate the comprehensive services related to the energy department with the plant business in the construction sector. He filled her in on how busy he was with many things to schedule and handle. Then he glanced at the phone in Kang's hand, smiling discreetly as Kang apologized over the phone, saying she couldn't make it to dinner that night. Sarcastically, Up said it didn't seem like she could go out for dinner with Hyun, which left her with a less than happy expression. He laughed, saying that if she had plans, she should just go. If she had all the requested data, she should just hand it over. She stammered that she hadn't finished yet, and Up continued, saying she could give him whatever she had because the director could do overtime alone. It was an obvious concern, and Kang smiled, saying she couldn't allow that and would need to stay to help him. Up was worried about Kang surviving only on chocolate bars, and instead of going home after work, he had decided to come up with an elaborate plan, using 100% of his brain for this single important moment. After waiting for Kang's overtime to end, he would make up an excuse to return to the office. The second step would be to order some delicious food, and then suddenly, he would receive a phone call and leave right after Kang had eaten. It was the perfect plan that would make Kang feel even closer to him for allowing her to go through such a thing. However, he miserably failed in his task now and wondered why she needed to schedule dinner with that guy again. Sighing, Up lay on the table, murmuring that he came to take care of her, but now had just made her work even more than before. Even he himself had ended up stuck working late, which certainly made him think Kang must be furious with him. A bit more optimistically, he hoped it would be fine if he bought something delicious for Kang to eat. He needed to make sure she ate first of all. With that, he left his office to discuss dinner with her, but her tired and gloomy face with a forced smile made him tense. Hesitating before approaching, he said that if she mentioned his name at Restaurant F, they would take care of it, but just in case, he wrote a note. Handing it to her, she replied that she would make sure to use it the next time she placed an order. He even tried to talk about the risotto, but calmly ignored him to answer the phone, making him start to sweat. He wondered if he should suggest she order 2 portions, worried she would certainly refuse to dine with him. He could imagine Kang making an overly detailed order, asking to spread the risotto rice, reduce the meat, and increase the parmesan. For the salad, she might ask for mozzarella and cherry tomatoes in balsamic vinegar, basil pesto, and white wine vinaigrette. Hesitating, he started talking about the risotto, trying to muster the courage to ask for more food in addition to the regular dinner. However, Kang simply put down the phone and smiled, saying she would go out to eat and would be back shortly, so she could pick up his dinner on the way back, leaving Up behind in silence. Later, Kang returned to hand him his dinner, and Up accepted it without even looking in her direction. Then he asked her to clarify something in the document on his screen because the dates didn't seem to match up. As she approached, Up stood up and pushed the chair for her to sit for a moment, thinking they should go over it again. Kang did as he asked and began typing on the computer. Then Up questioned what she had eaten, as she looked even hungrier than before, and if it was another chocolate bar, which made Kang avert her gaze, still quiet and with a serious expression. Then he grabbed the food plates, giving her the main dish while he took the salad, saying they should eat now. She stammered that she was fine because it was his food, but Up replied that he wasn't hungry and would just have the salad. This made her stand up, suggesting she could order something else, which frustrated Up, who ruffled his hair, blushing. When he asked her to at least eat a little, Kang hesitated for a moment before sitting back down. The smell of Up's cologne was intoxicating her and leaving her breathless, but Up simply said that it was better than fried chicken and that his palate was quite refined. Though she said it was delicious, deep down, The risotto tasted like nothing. Later, when work finally ended, she took the bus home. On the way, she rested her head against the window and closed her eyes to fall asleep, still hearing the sound of spoons against plates, the sound of food being chewed, Isiop's breathing, the scent of his cologne, the casual jokes, but she couldn't remember his expression in that moment. The way he had looked at her made her wonder if she was sick to have had such a reaction near him. A little later, she arrived home and entered quietly, letting Lee know that she was back, and soon realized that she was greeted by both Lee and Hyun. They mentioned that she was late, making Kang smile as she realized they had a guest that night. He approached her and touched her face, smiling as he said he had been waiting for her. The three sat down to talk, and Kang felt exhausted, complaining about the pain in her shoulders. Hyun asked why she was late when she had previously said she wasn't working overtime anymore. This made Kang grumble that it always happened. The executive director acted this way every day, constantly finding minor tasks to keep her busy. It was too childish from her point of view, which made Lee sympathize with her poor friend's tough life. Lee commented that it felt like years since they had seen each other, to which Kang replied that it was because Lee had been out drinking every day. Lee hugged Kang, complaining that her face looked too pale, asking if she had at least been eating properly. Offering her some fried chicken, Lee promised to give her the chicken thigh, but Kang replied that she was fine because she had already had dinner. This surprised Lee, who asked what that meant, and Kang stammered, averting her gaze as she explained that the executive director had bought her dinner. This made Lee scream in shock, even more so when she asked if Kang had really had dinner with Isiop, just the two of them, and Kang sipped her drink while turning her face away. Lee found it even more suspicious, feeling like something was going on, although even Kang couldn't quite understand. In her mind, it seemed like there was an atmosphere developing in the office, suggesting that the overtime was just an excuse to spend more time with her. Skeptical, Kang asked if Lee wasn't watching too many soap operas to come up with such things, not believing it was real at all. Besides, it was obvious that Isiop still hated her, she affirmed, averting her eyes as she remembered hearing him say that before. He had hated her from the first time they met in the training center until now, always intimidating her for no reason. Maybe he felt a little guilty about it that day, Kang concluded, which made both Lee and Hyun fall silent. But then Lee asked what Kang herself thought, and if she liked Isiop, causing Kang to stop and think about all the moments they had spent together, especially his smile. Kang hesitated, and Lee got excited, saying that Isiop was very handsome and definitely her type. Sighing, Lee said she wished she could date a guy who looked like the members of the boy group Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yondan. That would make work much more enjoyable, but still skeptical and horrified, Kang denied it, saying that wouldn't happen. The gentleman Lee was imagining was nothing but a puppy, like a Shiba Inu puppy. He never listened, but he was kind of cute, always growling when she was around, but still, a bit adorable. Imagining taking care of a puppy like that for more than 10 hours a day was much more exhausting than fun, something Lee certainly agreed with. It was tough, though Kang felt like she could endure it for a while and eventually transfer to another department. But her pride wouldn't allow her to just give up and leave like that, so she told them to wait and see how Isiop would one day recognize her. Later, Hyun said goodbye, telling Kang that he would see her at work the next day, but she mentioned that they could walk together. She was feeling indigestion now and also needed to buy some medicine, so the two of them left the house together. It had been a month since he returned to Korea, but even Kang hadn't realized it because time had passed so quickly. Hyun agreed, saying it felt like just the day before when they were in school together, and Kang commented that it was nice to walk together and remember those days. They used to share breaks, walk home together, and even work on projects together. Back then, he had a lot to teach her, but now it seemed like so much had changed since those times. She could still remember the old days when they studied together, and everyone commented on the statistics of the top students at the university that year. They mentioned that she was only 17 years old, but it was impressive that she got in on her first attempt like that. She had applied to a lower-ranked school because there was no medical college there, which almost made others jealous. It was Hyun who approached her back then, and the two started walking together ever since. She confessed that she was worried she wouldn't have any friends in college, but having Hyun there was a relief, which made him ask if the classes were difficult. In response, Kang agreed that so far, she was the only one taking calculus and linear algebra classes, but they were all really bad at it. So she was studying statistical mathematics and analytical regression on her own whenever she had time, and it seemed like it would be quite fun. She had discovered that the fact that statistics found patterns in seemingly irregular data and led them to mathematical theorems was particularly fascinating to her. It was fascinating for Kang that any uncertainty could be captured within a framework of logic like that. She hadn't fully understood multiple analyses yet, but she was sure Hyun would teach her a lot of what she still didn't know. This made him laugh, because even though he had helped her in high school, now she was much smarter than him. This surprised Kang, who denied it, saying that Isiop always knew about everything and was involved in extracurricular activities. He He was in a club and had many friends. He was so cool that she invited him and wished she could be like him. Seeing this made Hyun smile as he patted her head, thinking how adorable she was, and they continued talking that way. However, this closeness caused conflicts with some people, including the woman he was with at the time. One day, he decided to leave because he thought Kang hadn't eaten yet, which irritated the girl he was with, as they were together at that moment. Hyun insisted that even though she was just one person, he should do something to help the kid who had come to Seoul alone. This irritated her further, saying Kang wasn't a child in elementary school who needed that much care. It wasn't just once or twice either. The last time, he even left in the middle of a movie they were watching to be with Kang, which enraged her. This reaction made him say she was acting quite childish now, even as he explained that Kang had no friends her own age. His girlfriend complained that Hyun was making her seem weird again when he was the odd one. Even though they were dating, she felt like she was always second in his life, and no matter how much she tried to understand, it was too hard. It was as if she were the third wheel in the situation, and it made her furious to see it, but Hyun didn't react at first. Then he sighed, asking what exactly his girlfriend meant by that, as Kang was just like a little sister to him. His girlfriend almost laughed at that, saying little sister was a strange term to use for a girl who wasn't actually his sister. The argument continued for a long time until Hyun was forced to leave after being slapped in the face. Out on the street, he lit a cigarette and wondered how many times this had already happened, questioning if he was going crazy by making a kid his rival. The crack began at a totally unexpected moment, but later, he still went to meet Kang and Lee. They smiled at him, congratulating him on his military discharge, and Hyun adjusted his cap, realizing it had been a while since he saw Kang. He felt embarrassed that they were bringing flowers for him, feeling it was an exaggeration for a discharge gift. Blushing, Kang denied it, explaining that it was for her coming-of-age day, with Lee adding that she had received a confession that day. This caught Hyun off guard, and Lee teased Kang to hurry up and tell what had happened. Kang then told them about one of the freshmen in her department, a guy named Sungmin, recounting the events. Though Hyun just listened with a strange feeling, during all the time they had spent together since then, the crack inside him only deepened. Seeing Kang next to other guys and distancing herself from him made him feel that strange way, breaking more and more with no way to stop it. One day, Hyun approached his sister and asked what had happened and where Kang was, and she told him that Kang was in her room. It seemed she had broken up with her boyfriend and was feeling down, so Hyun went into Kang's room to see if she was okay. He found her lying in bed, grumbling that her ex had said she was boring and acted like a robot, that he hated her, and that it didn't even feel like they were dating. Sighing, Hyun sat next to her, still listening as she said she had kept all her promises, and they always made plans to go on dates after her busy schedule. In the end, she didn't know why they broke up, even though she had really tried and put so much effort into the relationship. Hyun remarked that she must have been upset, and trembling, Kang asked if she was really that boring, if she even seemed attractive like a girl was supposed to be. She just wanted to be a normal girl, but to Hyun, it was as if she didn't really know what love was. Since they were very young, he had always been ahead of her, waiting for Kang all this time. He had taught her everything, which made him wonder if it was no longer possible for them to grow closer. That's when Hyun impulsively turned Kang onto her back, not realizing what he was doing. It made him stammer and pull back, saying she shouldn't worry about what her ex had said, as none of it was true. Covering his face with his hand, Hyun wondered what he had just thought, blushing deeply. Once the crack began, things escalated at a terrible pace, fast enough to disrupt their relationship. That's why he decided to run away, traveling far and leaving it all behind, as if nothing had ever happened. Deep down, Hyun wanted to be a good person who could take care of Kang, always by her side like family. Now, he smiled while watching her, wondering when she had grown up so much, making her grumble that she was being treated like a child again. Still, he questioned why he always wished for more than just that and couldn't deal with his own feelings. Time passed, and Kang had received a message the previous night from Lee Sun-ae, the wife of the TK vice president and ICF's mother. She had heard that Kang would be picking him up from the family house, so she asked Kang to arrive 30 minutes earlier. Now, her hands were sweating with nerves as she swallowed hard and rang the large gate at the family home. When the door opened, Kang wondered what kind of person she should expect, excluding any positive adjectives and focusing on the important points. Surely, Sun-ae must be a meticulous perfectionist, the type of daughter-in-law who even the meticulous President Soo-won would criticize. A person who never made mistakes, not only in the family, but also for the employees, as she would never tolerate any failure or slip-up. Kang was led by a maid to meet Sun-ae, who turned to greet her and formally introduce herself. Sun-ae had a special affection for Isup, and Kang was well aware of this when she went to visit her. They sat down to talk, and Sun-ae mentioned that she had heard a lot about Kang, who had been forced into the secretary position, making Kang stammer. Kang tried to say it was more of an honor, though Sun-ae argued that she had heard Isiop could be quite demanding, and Kang must be going through a difficult time. But Kang denied it, stating that she found her job pleasant and rewarding, thinking to herself that Sun-ae was even more beautiful in person than in the pictures. The executive director looked a lot like his mother, and Sun-ae laughed, saying that last year, after the incident, Isiop had lost his enthusiasm for work, which had worried her. But after Kang arrived, it seemed that Isiop had returned to his old self, which had relieved her a great deal, and she smiled, thanking Kang for it. Hearing this, Kang smiled and responded that she would work even harder than before, while Sun-ae offered her more food. The two of them spoke openly for a long time, with Kang thinking that Sun-ae was indeed a kind person. Sun-ae admitted that, although it was a bit embarrassing, she hadn't been able to fix Isiop's pickiness, and if left alone, he would pretend to eat and starve himself. Kang commented that Sun-ae must have been upset, and the mother laughed, saying it was a little embarrassing, but even though Isiop was beautiful as a child, he was even more adorable. This made her reflect that she should have been firmer in teaching him properly, but whenever Isiop pouted, her heart softened, and she would just give him what he wanted to eat. Though Kang nodded in understanding, she felt it was quite obvious to see that even without explanation. Being naturally sensitive and not eating well, Sun-ae said her son had various health issues since childhood, and it didn't seem like much had changed. Even though she tried hard not to worry, just looking at how she had called someone as busy as Kang to talk made it clear that she was still concerned. Seeing Kang reminded her of when Isiop had gone to kindergarten for the first time and she had met with the teacher. In fact, Sun-ae had a reason for wanting to meet Kang that day, something behind all her questions. Meanwhile, Sujin rushed to her brother's room and opened the door, telling him that Kang was downstairs, surprising him with how quickly she arrived. He tried to play it cool, looking away and saying he didn't care, which made his sister laugh, leaving him feeling embarrassed. Sujin questions why her brother is dressing up so much and if he is going out on a date, which makes him hesitate before responding that he has a meeting. But that wasn't enough to calm Sujin, who continued teasing her brother, asking if it was with Kang, constantly provoking him. She kept insisting to know if there had been any progress between them, to which Isiop tells her to stop implying such things. She jokes that when a man and a woman spend so much time together, they might develop feelings for each other. Finally, Isiop shouts at her to shut up, making the atmosphere tense, angrily stating that he wasn't interested and declaring that he didn't like Kang. They were forced to be together only because of work, and just because a man and a woman are close doesn't mean they are dating. Sujin's teasing had gone too far, it was just companionship, and nothing to joke about. This made Sujin surprised, asking why he was so shaken, and Isiop complains that she always says these things, claiming he feels bad for someone who doesn't even care. His sister argues that she was just joking, but Isiop retorts that she was also being disrespectful to Kang. Obviously, she would feel uncomfortable if she knew her boss was making jokes about her behind her back. Meanwhile, Sun-ae tells the protagonist that she heard her son fainted again, and suddenly reporters were swarming everywhere. This makes Kang apologize, claiming it was all his fault, saying he should have been more aware and taken proper precautions beforehand. But Sun-ae reassures him that it was expected that he wouldn't know, as her husband, Vice President Tao Sia-woo, did everything to hide the truth. He always said that the future president of the TK group shouldn't have such weaknesses, which made Sun-ae regret never stopping her husband. 34 years ago, news spread that South Korea was caught up in a love story that seemed straight out of a movie between the second daughter of the TK group, Ta Seo-hee, and an unknown volleyball player, Kang Ji-wook. Moreover, her attention was also focused on the future of CS planning and Lee Seon-jung, as the strategic marriage between the TK group and the CS group symbolized the union of two companies that dominated Korean media and the economy. Anxiety among domestic and international investors was rising. There were also concerns about the future direction of both companies' businesses. Despite being told to forget that woman because Tai was terrible and irresponsible, having abandoned him for a pathetic man, and breaking the promise made between the families, Seon responded that she didn't know what that woman meant to him. Talks of Seo-woo and Sun-ae marrying instead were ridiculous after all, especially since Sun-ae had just graduated from college, and it was necessary. There was no other way. Even with her dreams of a graduation certificate, when Sun-ae graduated from the journalism and media department and was ready for postgraduate studies, all of that was wasted and thrown away. Nothing could be done under these circumstances. They just told Sune to hold on, as in a man's social life, the woman should take care of him. And this was how marriage should be from the beginning. Everything would be fine as long as she did her best. These were things she heard, forcing Sune to think of Isiop's well-being. Her husband began pressuring him, saying it was a great opportunity, a chance to take back what Tae-seo he had stolen from him. With his inherent lineage and handsome face, people would be fascinated by Tae-seowoo's son, so he decided to use his own child for this purpose. Thus, Iseop's childhood was turbulent, filled with a barrage of words and camera flashes in his face, gradually shaping who he became. His mother cried while hugging him, encouraging him, and saying that he would succeed because he was just like her, and Iseop agreed, hugging her back. Now, Sunai could only tear up, and Kang grew a bit worried, prompting her to apologize, saying she got lost in memories of the past. Stammering, Sunai reassures Kang that it wasn't his fault, and even though it might not seem like it, Iseop had a personality that didn't express his emotions well. There were many times when things went unnoticed, and when he was stressed, he didn't think about his own health, ignoring it until he fainted. That's why, smiling, Sunai wanted to make a request to the protagonist, no matter how embarrassing it might be. Later, Sunai noticed that Sujin and Iseop were finally coming down the stairs from his room to the living room. The protagonist bows when she sees them, politely greeting the executive director as he approaches, and Iseop responds just as courteously. The two approach them, with Sunai asking if her son slept well, and Iseop nods, leaning to greet his mother as well. She reminds him that he should eat breakfast first, and Iseop responds that there's nothing to worry about because he's not hungry. Sunai noticed that her son seemed to be losing weight, and the director replies that maybe he ate something delicious the night before, so he was full. This makes her say that she understands he's in a hurry, but she asks him to eat something before leaving, especially since she made his favorite clam soup. He apologizes, promising that he will eat next time, making the protagonist think that she also missed her parents. She could only watch them silently conversing until Iseop looks at her, losing his smile, walking past her and saying it was time to leave. A little later, Kim asked the protagonist if everything was okay because he thought it would be better for her to persuade Sunai. But she responds that everything was fine, that she had to do this, making Kim hand her a box, complimenting her for being amazing. At its core, this was about Madame Sunay's embarrassing request, which was nothing more than offering some strange items to Iseop. The protagonist smiles and explains that it was a tonic that strengthens the body and boosts energy during seasonal transitions. It was a remedy containing the essence of a family secret passed down through generations. An exclusive recipe created by the nephew of Jema Yim, the direct disciple of a renowned Korean doctor, and it contained a unique formula. Administered in a traditional Korean medical clinic with a 170-year legacy. The herbs were meticulously boiled for 3 days and nights to achieve their full medicinal potency. Called Saijeon Daebosup, and Iseop complains that it was just herbal medicine, and she exaggerated the whole story. He questions where she bought that, and what was wrong with that strange cup that looked like an onion. The protagonist explains that the reason the natural remedy was unpleasant was because of its appetite-killing color and distinct odor. Still, the cup was adorable, and drinking through a straw blocked the odor, making it seem like he wasn't even taking medicine. It didn't seem like a trick that made Iseop very happy, as expected by Kang, and he really panicked. This made her wonder why Sunay was making him go through this, but she had to manage to fulfill the requirements. The envelope given by the protagonist's wealthy mother was very motivational, so the protagonist smiles nervously as she says she heard that this natural remedy was prepared. In a different way, it wasn't sour at all and had no smell, leaning closer to Iseop, who blushed while she explained that she also had a trick up her sleeve, as her younger siblings always hated taking medicine too. That's why she added a special ingredient she developed to make it easier to swallow, which was a teaspoon of brown sugar. He turns his face away and grumbles that she shouldn't lie to him, unable to deal with Kang's closeness. She insists that he at least take a sip of the remedy, even showing that it smelled good, which makes him hesitate before asking her to hand it over. This pleases her because it seemed she had made him want to drink it, hoping that Iseop would drink it all. But he only approaches to smell the remedy, surprising her when he pulls away, covering his nose because it was far from smelling good. Nervously, the protagonist stammers that she understood he wasn't a fan of the smell, but she actually liked it a lot. This makes Iseop slam his hands on the table and stand up, asking if she really liked the smell, worrying her because he seemed angry. Iseop leans in, asking if she thought he was an idiot for playing games with him using a toy cup. This makes her stammer nervously, saying it was musky, blushing as she said it reminded her of the cologne the executive director wore, which is why she liked it. Faced with her shy reaction of lowering her face, the protagonist wonders what exactly she had just said, realizing it was the dumbest thing she's ever said. She looks at Iseop when he chuckles a little, telling her not to play around with him, but still taking the remedy from her hand and drinking it. Leaving Kang confused, not understanding his reaction, she quickly opens the candy when Iseop complains that it was sour. She extends her hand to him, and Iseop leans in and eats the candy from her hand, making Kang blush even more when she felt his lips on her fingers. Quickly pulling her hand back to her chest, her heart racing after that, and seeing this, the director laughs, sitting back down at the table. Jokingly, Asura says that if Kang wanted the remedy too, she should take the natural one, which makes her turn her face, still blushing. Laughing, Asura responds that she was the one who started teasing first, making Kang stammer that it wasn't like that, drawing a laugh from him as he calls her cute. This comment caught both of them off guard, with Asura saying it unintentionally, leaving both of them tense. Slowly, Kang asks what exactly he just said, and Asura stammers, unsure of how to respond, until he suddenly yells that the cup was cute, blushing deeply while laughing exaggeratedly as he changes the subject. The protagonist covers her face with her hands, and Asura asks what her expression was all about, as it was impossible he would call her cute like that. But Kang was delighted because he liked Kang Doka too, super happy because she had never met someone else who also appreciated it. Even though he didn't understand anything, Asura agrees, even without knowing what was happening, though the protagonist felt she almost got too carried away. A little later, he was caught off guard when Kang came to him with a gift of that same character, but strangely, it didn't bother him. In the last 10 years of his career, the Asura the protagonist knew hid his intentions behind an enigmatic smile. He would quickly drive negotiations by skillfully exploiting the weaknesses of his counterparts in meetings and discussions. Now, he was doing the same, stating that manager Kim had high performance results, but questioning why the established goal was so low since it wasn't a neighborhood convenience store. That's why he wanted to know the current status of NS in terms of percentage, which made the men tense during the discussion. It was obvious that Asura was born for the business world, having the ability to lead people in his favor and intimidate them without much effort. Despite this, that same man was using the pen Kang gave him as a gift in front of everyone without any shame. He states they should ensure the changes are communicated so they can receive a report, thus concluding the meeting, saying that bitter medicine wasn't good for the mouth, but it was effective against illnesses. The important thing was to take the bitter medicine and be healthy. You could always buy candy later to remove the bad taste. At least that was his conclusion after everything. Later, the men wonder how Asura managed to see everything at that moment, noting that he truly had sharp instincts and keen eyes. They thought he might be starting to like the company, but it didn't seem that way as he still behaved the same as always. As everyone left, Kang bows in farewell, observing the situation for a moment. Later, when the protagonist visited Asura's office to tell him it was time to take his medicine, he jumped up and complained like a child who didn't want to. Despite smiling, the protagonist continues, saying that bitter medicine was effective, and she approaches him to the point where Asura had to back away with a grimace. The fact was that Asura, who always wore a veil and only showed of himself what he wanted others to see, acting like a spoiled child toward Kang, always made her heart restless, even when she had to put in more effort to take care of him. As the protagonist moved through other areas of the company, the employees insisted on talking about Asura, as ever since they met, she'd only talked about him. Typically, Asura was someone that people like them rarely saw in person, which is why they had only heard rumors about him. And they thought he was the company's promotional model the first time they saw him, as being able to see such a beautiful face every day was the best benefit of all. The girl laughs because not only Asura, but there were other attractive lawyers in that company recently. Time passed, and Kang continued to accompany Asura as usual, observing him throughout his time at work. Despite that, he didn't stop teasing the protagonist from time to time, making her blush occasionally, only leaving her more confused. Whenever Asura acted like a child, whenever he bothered her or smiled at her with that expression, it made her feel special. While out for her daily run, the protagonist heard a voice calling her and had to squint to see who was coming from the distance, until she realized it was Asura himself, running with a broad smile, his eyes shining as that same feeling repeated itself. When Asura stopped near her, panting after running, she slowly says he had been calling her for a long time. And Kang apologizes, saying she didn't hear him because she was wearing earphones, listening to music during her run. He responds that it was fine, and he was just happy to see her there. So the two walk together along the path, and Asura notices that her house is nearby, realizing that she actually lives close to him, internally freaking out at seeing what Kang wears on the weekends. The protagonist agrees that the company is nearby and the transportation is convenient, and Asura asks why he had never seen her even once during all this time. He had been running almost every day recently, to which Kang explains that she had been going through a tough time lately and took a break from exercising. This made him a bit anxious, but she continues by asking if he runs there often, and Asura confirms that he started recently as a hobby. There was nothing better than running by the Han River when he needed to clear his mind, which surprised the protagonist. She runs her hand through her hair, saying it's strange because she always goes running by the Han River when she feels the same way. To Asura, it seemed like a coincidence, though internally, he thanked Kim for helping him create a better connection with her. He then asks what she was thinking about while running that day, and she hesitates, just looking at him. Changing the subject, she asks him what he thought about the marketing promotion plan she submitted last time. Before he could respond, she mentions that she didn't receive any feedback, so she was a little worried. That makes Isiop fall silent, thinking that to Kang, he was just the executive director, and running into her boss on her day off must have been terrible. So, he stops walking and says he's leaving, wishing her a good weekend and saying he'd see her at work. They had been colleagues since she joined the company 10 years ago. Now, they were executive director and secretary working together. This made Isiop wonder how their relationship might have been if he weren't who he is now, if they were just ordinary colleagues. All the kinds of experiences they could have shared together without worrying about anything else. If he weren't Kang's boss, or rather, if Kang weren't his secretary, he couldn't help but think about these things from time to time. On another day, a group of employees were eating together, and one of them mentions that he's getting married to his high school sweetheart in March of the following year. The girls comment that it's very romantic. As expected, decent men are always committed. This even leads someone to joke about setting Hyeon up on a blind date, which makes him a little nervous. This surprised the girls because they thought Hyeon was in a relationship too. They even thought he was dating Kang. Both quickly deny it, though the girls insist they thought so because they heard they've known each other for a long time. And they'd seen them leaving work together a few times, looking really close, which makes the protagonist laugh because sometimes people confuse them like that. However, they persist in asking why they're not actually dating, catching her off guard. They keep insisting that they're perfect for each other, with good jobs, good personalities, and good looks. After all, they were at the age to marry, and it could be that their soulmate was right next to them, making Kang laugh as she denies it, saying they're just close like family. He had lived long enough to know that marriage is better with someone you feel comfortable with. Only foolish women chase after men. Women are happy when they find men who treat them like princesses, which is why he thinks Kang should be smart and considerate. After hesitating, Hyeon says that the manager is making Kang uncomfortable with these comments and making everyone uneasy. But the manager insists that Hyeon must find the protagonist charming, saying Kang acts that way because she dresses that way, but if you look closely, she has a pretty face. This makes Hyeon laugh nervously and state that such behavior is considered harassment in the workplace. So, he should stop saying things like that because they could be misinterpreted, making the manager laugh, saying it was just a joke. The girls laughed too, saying if they had a boyfriend like Hyeon, they would have married him right away and wanted to meet someone like him. Later, when they left, the protagonist comments that they must be getting old to be discussing marriage without even considering dating first. Hyeon replies that his mother has also been making a fuss about him going on blind dates lately. This makes the protagonist curious because it seemed like there was something to it, with no point in forcing marriages like that. That's why Kang thinks they should start dating before committing. She was too busy to date and hated the idea of worrying about and caring for someone else. It was then that people around them started talking about director Isiop, who was walking nearby and soon noticed the protagonist. Kang, like the other employees, bows as Isiop walks by, causing him to glance at her while passing. Before returning to his conversation with the people he was walking with, a little later, the employees straighten up again. Distracted, Hyeon notices her and places a hand on her shoulder, commenting that they should leave as well, and she nervously agrees. In the distance, Isiop looks over his shoulder and realizes that Hyeon is standing too close to her. And not only that, but she was smiling at him until Hyeon notices Isiop's gaze and just smiles before turning away. At home, Isiop arrives furious, fuming over Hyeon's smug attitude, wondering why he's monopolizing Kang like that. Always acting like a fool around her in a way that makes him livid, it didn't seem like he was just a senior close to Kang. It was obvious there was something different in his eyes. Could anyone trust the words of someone like that? Did Kang not even realize she was being foolish around this guy? In fact, Isiop wonders if they could be in a relationship now without his knowledge. Pausing to think, earlier at the hotel, they had spent time together, which makes consider all the possibilities. In his office, he hears Kang return, asking if he enjoyed his meal because the afternoon meeting was about to begin. Isiop remains silent while she explains that the afternoon schedule includes a review of the plans to achieve the quarterly promotions, as well as a meeting with each department head, and afterward, they would head to the Suwon branch. Finally, she mentions that if Isiop approves the final audit report, the day's schedule will be complete. But instead of responding to her, he says that he doesn't care if they're dating or not, but she should know how to keep her personal and professional lives separate at the office. Kang is confused about what he's talking about as she watches him stand up, but since she genuinely doesn't seem to know, he hesitates and sighs deeply. He asks how it looks to others if a secretary close to the executive director is in a romantic relationship with a temporary lawyer at the company. Kang responds that it's a misunderstanding and that Hyeon is just a friend, but Isiop can't believe her words. He stares at her with a tense smile, sarcastically saying that the two of them went to a hotel together, claiming no one would misunderstand that. It creates a tense silence for a long moment, and Iseop feels he made a terrible mistake accusing her like that. So, he runs his hand through his hair, trying to correct himself, but the protagonist smiles, agreeing with him that she will be more careful. Later, Kang goes home and rushes to meet Lee, who is excited with a drink in hand so they can celebrate together. This is because Lee had landed an exclusive interview with Patrick Poiver, CEO of GV, and the protagonist congratulates her on her impressive new achievement. Lee asks her not to tell anyone yet because it's still confidential, and he will be coming to Korea next month. The protagonist asks if GV isn't the most famous company in the fashion industry right now, and Lee agrees that it is. Because it was worth flying 15 hours to France, she was so busy she didn't even manage to do a proper tour during her trip. But she still managed to buy a gift for the protagonist, which took her by surprise because from the packaging, it looked like a really expensive item. She didn't normally wear that kind of thing, but Lee responds that she thought it would look good on her as she wore it, something to wear casually and still look stylish. Then, she helps put it around Kang's neck, showing her in the mirror that she looks really beautiful. The protagonist thanks her, saying she could wear it from that day on, and Lee tells her not to think about work all the time. She could dress well and enjoy a drink. This makes her pause and think about Iseop, which piques Lee's curiosity about her hesitation, and the protagonist changes the subject, saying it's nothing. That's when Lee reveals that she doesn't want her overthinking, and it's obvious that she wants to look pretty for the executive director. Stammering, Kang agrees that she needs to maintain a good appearance to work alongside Iseop, but Lee corrects her, saying it's not about that. She means looking pretty like a woman should for a man, becoming attractive. The protagonist denies that's the case, thinking it's ridiculous because they're talking about Iseop, though Lee could see her friend's attraction to him. Again, she stammers that it's only natural to feel a little excited when seeing the handsome man in front of her, but if you put it that way, all the female employees should like Iseop. Blushing, Kang averts her gaze and murmurs that she doesn't like him, but she's never liked Iseop since the first time she saw him, claiming she hates guys like the director. 10 years ago, the group of students Kang was involved with discussed rumors that they were the dream team. All of this was because of a certain person, since they had put the two best students in the same group, expecting them to take care of each other. One of them feared they would be penalized for not securing first place, which was worrisome because there was a certain individual with great connections who was hired through the public recruitment process. It was complicated, as some poorer candidates should have been rejected just to let that person in first. It made most of the students uncomfortable. It didn't seem like there was any difference between them and the chaebols. There was nothing they could do but be envious of the third-generation chaebol. They had spent years preparing to get into the company, and now this happened. Still, Kang tried to cheer them up, saying that if he had such great connections or was involved in cheating, he wouldn't have come in second place. This drew laughter from the other students as she insisted they shouldn't overthink it and should focus on doing their best. Besides, the Dream Team sounded like a pretty cool name, so Kang was definitely excited. When they gathered, that was when the protagonist met the person in question, taller than the others, with a gentle voice and graceful movements. Was it even possible for someone to seem so perfect? It was like a prince from a fairy tale had stepped into reality, and Kang couldn't help but watch him. She wanted to impress Iseop, who soon noticed her presence, hoping that whenever they made eye contact, they could at least smile politely at each other. Even though Kang smiled brightly, Iseop's tense smile only grew worse the longer they looked at each other. Not only that, but he grew confused as to why she was staring at him, blushing and nervously averting her gaze. Later, when Kang went to the cafeteria for a snack, she found Iseop again, this time sitting alone at a table. Naturally, she approached his table, and Iseop nervously laughed, suggesting she sit with him, making her immediately thank him, clearly happy. The two sat across from each other and began to eat together, though it was clear that Iseop was tense and nervous for some reason. When she noticed him coughing, the protagonist asked if he had any allergies, and he denied it, trying to understand the reason for her question. Kang explained that he seemed a little uncomfortable, asking if he was feeling itchy. To this, he nervously responded that she was right, and Kang suggested it could be due to dust or the heat. This prompted Iseop to ask if she was feeling the same, and she immediately denied it, saying she felt perfectly fine. Then she complimented the fish cake, amazed that it had so little oil in it, noting how it wasn't greasy at all to eat. She offered Iseop a taste as well, so he squeezed some lemon on it before trying the fish cake she was talking about. Finally, he was surprised, making the protagonist smile as she realized he must have understood how delicious it tasted. He began to praise it, saying it was even better than he expected, when another student approached to talk to Kang suddenly. This caused her to turn and chat with the other person, leaving Iseop feeling a bit left out, though he said nothing about it. Later on, the protagonist presented her entire project to the group with the drawings she had made on paper, explaining that they could finalize it by stretching their arms this way. They all showered her with compliments, noting that she was great at drawing too, which left Iseop shocked. asking what kind of talent show this was. The protagonist declared that they had to get first place no matter what. They were the dream team and could achieve it. Thus, she asked who should be the protagonist, and one of them suggested Up for the role, which made him tense and visibly uncomfortable. Everyone agreed because Up looked like a male protagonist, and it would be amazing to see him in that new role. Noticing Up's reaction, Kang commented that since she was organizing the performance, she thought the protagonist could be Choi Seong-yong. He was part of the judo team, and the highlight of the performance was the lifting, so she thought it would be better for someone strong to take that role. Choi agreed, feeling honored, and Up nervously smiled, saying he didn't have the muscle strength for that role anyway. The protagonist laughed, responding that it didn't matter if he wasn't an expert. Even if Up wasn't in the role, they could still get first place. This almost offended him, prompting him to complain that he could do it, and so they proceeded with the rehearsal according to the protagonist's plans. After Up performed the part of lifting someone in his arms, he looked at Kang, who clapped cheerfully and showered him with praise for his performance. Then she turns around, saying that Up and Song could be the main leads of the performance, happy that things were going well. Turning away and ignoring Up again, this irritated him once more because she left him out to talk with other people. But for some reason, Kang felt like Up was staring at her furiously, and she wondered if she had done something wrong to make him look at her so intensely. When she glanced in his direction, Up quickly turned his face to the side, ignoring her too, and she was confused because he was smiling with others. Time passed, and another activity day arrived, where it was announced they would make paper planes in teams of 2. They would calculate the flight time and distance of each plane to add to each team's score, and of course, Kang and Up ended up in the same team again. This frustrated Up because he was standing next to her, and he wondered why this kept happening. It was too uncomfortable for him to deal with. Still, Up suggested that they first choose the paper and the color they should use. Kang responded that any would do. There didn't seem to be any difference in weight or size. Hesitating, he asked if she had ever made a paper plane before, and the protagonist thought that while she hadn't made one specifically, she could predict the most advantageous design for the plane. Flight originally works with thrust, lift, and gravity, so how effectively those factors are distributed would determine the stability of the flight. In the case of a normal plane, lift is generated by Bernoulli's principle, but with a paper plane, the implementation of an aerodynamic wing would be specific. Kang's complex explanation made Up's ears hurt, wondering what exactly she was rambling about. But she continued talking, saying that to increase the flight time, they would need to consider the center of lift and the center of gravity. If the center of gravity is behind the center of lift, the plane might become unstable and crash. This made Up hesitate before agreeing that he understood her point of view. Kang's excitement didn't stop, and Up said he would start by making the paper plane first, adding that she was lucky because he liked origami. This surprised the protagonist, imagining it was a shocking hobby for a third-generation chaebol. Smiling, Up said that of all things, paper planes were his specialty, recalling the praise he used to receive from a household staff. He asked her what kind of plane she wanted him to fold. She could choose between a fighter jet, stealth, F-15K, connector, Sky King, Delta, supersonic, or even just a generic plane. This time, it was Kang who hesitated because she didn't know the planes by name and therefore needed to know their shapes. If the wings sloped down, it was called a dihedral angle, and if it was in the shape of a Y, it was called an anhedral angle. Generally, the dihedral angle had a larger wind reception area than the anhedral angle, so it was more stable. But this time, Up shouted for her to stop, catching her by surprise. He complained that she was taking everything too seriously, even when it was just a friendly activity they were supposed to participate in. She stammered that if they were going to participate, they should aim for first place. The team that came in first could win a TK smartphone. Although Up was still irritated because it was clearly a product clearance, he gave a tense laugh, saying he could understand her ambition. He guessed she must have risked her life to become the best recruit at TK, so he remarked that he would be careful from now on, because Kang, who loved being number 1, might be aiming for the top at TK, which made Kang stammer in response, saying he was jumping to conclusions. Up insisted that it was true. He was quite selfish and liked to argue, even though he tried to keep it a secret from everyone. It seemed like it was easily discovered. The closeness made Kang blush, until she understood what he said and averted her gaze, saying she would make sure to keep that secret. This made him step back, complaining again, tired of her constant seriousness all the time. It was as if she couldn't even take a joke. As Up walked away to make the plane on his own, Kang approached, saying there was no need to worry because he seemed like a rational and sensible man. This made him respond that he must be coming across as cold, and she nervously denied it, saying that he was kind, gentle, and polite, to which he replied that he must be perfect. This silenced the protagonist, who could only watch as he made the paper plane, until he looked at her and asked why she was staring at him. The protagonist finally admitted that that it was true. He was perfect, but Iseup felt like she was once again looking at him with that expression that made him feel like nothing, thinking that he almost turned into a boring guy when he was around Kang, which hurt his pride and made him turn his face away from her. Later on, the protagonist heard from the girl who was supposed to perform with Iseup that she had twisted her ankle, apologizing for the unfortunate timing. It was complicated because only Kang knew all the parts of the performance, which shocked Iseup as he wondered why this was happening again. This meant that Kang would end up taking the role of the other girl, meaning she would perform alongside him. However, the protagonist assured him there was no need to worry, as she was always training her body to be ready for any unexpected situations. She received more compliments from various students for being so impressive, leaving Iseup wondering if there was anything she couldn't do. In response, he remarked that it was too last minute, and they should at least change some things, not sure if they could really go through with it. The protagonist looked at him and said if it was too difficult for him, they could reconsider, which again hit Iseup's pride. She pointed out that Kang and Song Yeonju had different physiques, and he might notice the change in weight, making it difficult. Kang hadn't thought about this before and agreed it might be better to review things as Iseup had suggested from the start. Quickly, Iseup corrected her, saying it was easy for him, and there was no problem with a mere change of people. Time passed, and the day of their joint performance arrived, but Iseup felt like he had been tricked again. He had fallen for Kang's cheap provocation that she knew would hit his pride, and he wondered if she really was almost 170 centimeters tall. She was probably a bit heavier compared to the other girl before, and he didn't know what to expect as the performance continued up to the crucial part. Finally, when Iseup lifted her, he was caught off guard, realizing that Kang was actually smaller and lighter than she seemed at first. Moreover, despite not appearing that way at first glance, it seemed her bust was larger than her clothes had suggested. When Iseup woke up from his sleep, in the present, he could hardly believe what had happened, so he rushed to the shower, still in shock, totally embarrassed because he had clearly lost his mind to the point of having that kind of dream about a subordinate like Kang. And it wasn't just an indecent dream about anyone, but specifically about that Kang. After his shower, he even sat down to listen to some classical music, taking deep breaths to calm himself down. Things had been tense lately, and he had probably lost his mind temporarily to end up in such a situation. After all, how could it even be possible for him to dream about that weirdo, nerdy, robot-like, four-eyed Kang? Sure, he could admit that she had a pretty face, but he couldn't stop thinking about her bust, which drove him crazy just remembering it. Slapping his own forehead, Iseup wondered how he could be thinking about Kang so much. He was the famous Iseup Tar. Many people had approached him with bad intentions up until now, whether they were weird, obscene, classmates, athletes, actresses, popular figures, idols, even strangers. He had been immune to the temptations and corruptions of these people, claiming that they were all materialistic and impure. And suddenly, he found himself dreaming about something like that. And not just that, but about someone who had zero interest in him. Iseup was tall, handsome, rich, basically the perfect man from many different perspectives, even if he used filters in photos to feel a bit better about himself. He paused to think more positively about it, realizing it was a natural occurrence, perfectly normal for a healthy man, and there was no reason to feel guilty. That's why Iseup reassured himself that he was a man, and it was okay to feel this way, even as he listened to music to calm and comfort himself. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he was Iseup Tae, filling himself with compliments and remembering his own qualities, affirming to himself that he was a healthy and amazing man. While listening to music in his office and relaxing, he thought it was noisy outside, but inside, it was warm and peaceful. A beautiful song filled the air of the room, great for his mental health, until suddenly Kang burst into the room, greeting him with a good morning. This made him let out a startled yell, immediately glancing at her blouse and questioning what exactly she was wearing so early in the morning. Kang responded that it was a bit warm inside because of the heater, so she opted for lighter clothing. But Iseup hid behind his desk, demanding that she take it off immediately. If she was cold, she should put on a sweater, questioning why she even turned on the heater. With a laugh, the protagonist explained that it was to reduce carbon emissions, showing him the new environmental management strategy announcement. Still, he shouted that as of this year, they had become an eco-friendly company and would no longer support air conditioners, pounding the desk with his fists. Faced with this torrent of complaints, the protagonist turned off the heater, sighing because he was barking orders at her as usual. Even then, Iseup shouted for her to leave the office and stay out of his sight until he called for her properly. That night, Kang told Hyun and Lee all about how he suddenly started throwing everything at her. She had never met such an unpredictable person in her life. Lee was surprised, thinking things were going well between them, but suddenly this happened. Hyun commented that he was just weird. This drew an irritated laugh from Kang. It almost felt like a trip watching him act normal in front of others without shouting all the time, smiling, laughing, and putting on a serious voice. It was almost funny. How could someone be so shameless in this way? Whenever she looked at Icy from behind, she wanted to hit him over the head with something just to get back at him. This made Lee laugh. Never having heard the protagonist talk this way about anyone before, it was quite the novelty, and Hyun agreed that she must be going through a rough time. Still, Kang responded that it wasn't so hard, nothing she couldn't handle. She could see the worst side of him, and it wouldn't affect her. This made Hyun go quiet, hesitating before saying she should try putting her pride aside and think about everything more objectively. She had worked at TK for 10 long years and was qualified enough to be the youngest in the department head team. He asked if she really thought it made sense to work for a man and be treated so horribly every day. It might be Icyop, but the title of being the crown prince of TK was old news now. He wondered if this was all because of HR, because if that were the case, Hyun could help her with legal means. Kang quickly denied that there was any need to go that far for her, apologizing because she didn't mean to make him worry. Once again, Hyun fell silent before saying that he couldn't understand her. At first, he wasn't going to say it, but Kang should know that Icyop wasn't a good person. Even with the Baekhyang resort project they were working on, it could be beneficial for their respective positions. But before he could finish speaking, Kang asked him to stop, catching him off guard when she looked at him that way. She told him that, in fact, the executive director had a tough life too, which confused Hyun since Icyop was just a third-generation heir. The protagonist hesitated for a moment before responding that he didn't know anything about it. But that didn't stop Hyun, who said he knew about Icyop's life through what was written in the books. The Baekhyang resort deal was a deceptive merger and acquisition, and there was also accounting fraud involved. Kang replied that it was all the vice president's doing. Executive Director Icyop didn't even know the company's financial details. Still, Hyun insisted that even if Icyop didn't know about it, it was obvious who would benefit most from such things. The protagonist frowned, understanding his point, and asked what he thought they should do, as it was just their job. A little later, Kang received a message from Usiop asking her to report directly to the office, not his home, by 8 a.m. So, she took the subway, getting off at the next station, walking alone through the busy area toward work as usual, until she was caught by surprise when she realized there was a protest happening, with people rallying to protect their jobs and prevent layoffs. Everyone was shouting that they were fighting for their right to survive and demanding an apology from the TK company. A little later, Kang barged into Icyop's office to see him, finding him staring out the window at the people outside. He told her to explain the situation, and after hesitating, Kang explained that during the Baekhyang Resort's mergers and acquisitions process, an asset sale contract was chosen instead of a merger to avoid mass layoffs. This made Icyop realize she had known about it from the beginning, wanting to know why she hadn't told him. After hesitating again, Kang explained that the business half was significantly smaller compared to the company's total revenue, and the scale of the M, and it didn't require the director's approval. According to the regulations, Kang hadn't reported the situation to Icyop, which made him run a hand through his hair. Muttering that it was always like this, Kang always thought she knew everything about him and kept acting that way, assuming things. Icyop turned, saying he hadn't liked her since the day they met and thought he had temporarily forgotten about it. He stepped closer, asking if she thought Son Baekjae would guarantee her an executive position because of what she was doing. If that was the case, she was wrong, and he thought she would have been smarter to realize that from the start, which made Kang straighten up, stammering in denial, and looking into his eyes when he asked if she was doing all this for her brothers, a sacrifice she was making for her family, which shocked the protagonist, who had no idea how he knew about that. Once again, Icyop stepped even closer, asking if she really expected him not to have known from the beginning. It was naive of her. He had known everything from the start and had only pretended not to. The same applied to this whole situation. That's how Icyop had lived his entire life. He knew his own situation better than anyone else. He had been giving his best for this company just as much as Kang had, which was why she should know that he knew more about this company than she ever would. He ran his fingers through her hair and touched Kang's shoulder as she teared up, while hearing him say this wasn't the first time he had dealt with something like this. He had been responsible for cleaning up all the messes left behind by his father. That's what he had been doing all this time. And they had used Kang's own weaknesses against her to force her to be his secretary so she could handle everyone else's problems in his place. In the face of Icyop's frustration and anger, with him tearing up as well, the protagonist tried to touch his arm. But it was Icyop who grabbed her wrist first, asking if she had been playing him from the beginning. This was his job, yet she was getting involved like this, which made the protagonist shrink back. Realizing he was taking his anger out on her, he released her wrist and stepped back with a sigh, running his hand through his hair as he turned away. After a long silence, Asura asked Kang to request a department transfer, begging her to do it, assuring her there would be no repercussions as he sat down on the couch with his head lowered. He asked her just to leave, his hands trembling as he wondered why she had to be his secretary. He just wanted her out of his sight. Seeing this emotional breakdown from Asura, Kang shouted at him to stop and pull himself together, catching him completely by surprise. Kang told him that he should be thinking of a way to resolve things now, not dumping a sad story on her. Every employee knew how devoted Asura had been to TK for the past 10 years, which was why he was able to stay in that position. Even after the incident with the vice president, and Kang had always considered it an honor to be Asura's assistant. But now, he couldn't think that he could just throw away all the hard work he had put in over those years. It would be a terrible waste. Besides, Kang also wanted to keep a track record of perfect work without tarnishing her resume. As he should know, she had always received perfect scores on her performance reviews despite being assigned impossible jobs or projects. So, he didn't need to worry, which made Asura hesitate before letting out a deep sigh, his face red. Then he began trembling as he laughed, realizing this had always been the true Kang, smiling after everything. She was like TK's secret weapon, and seeing his reaction, the protagonist stepped closer, asking him just to give her the orders for what to do. With a lighter expression, Asura told her to do whatever she wanted, recalling that to Kang. He was really just another work responsibility. Though he still hoped to hear her words take on another meaning someday, she certainly had no idea of his thoughts now. The former vice president, Seo Woo-tae, had been involved in fraudulent accounting practices and corporate mergers aimed at manipulating the resort's stock prices. In the process, the Baekhyang Resort acquisition and merger were carried out through an unconventional asset purchase agreement instead of a typical merger and acquisition. So, legally, there were no obligations regarding employee retention, and the negotiation between TK and the union had no binding clauses. The TK group, despite having the option to avoid responsibility and dissolve illegal strikes through the use of police, chose to meet with the representatives to hear their demands. The union demanded job security under the leadership of Executive Director Asura. Despite massive media attention, opposition from management, and a drop in stock prices, TK Corporation incurred significant expenses to retain the employees in question. There were numerous document reviews and simulations, the lines between day and night blurred, and the days continued to pass. It was constant pressure every day, and weekends were filled with business trips until the very last minute. On one of those days, Asura, visibly exhausted, asked his secretary if she could calculate the number of redundant staff for the job succession process and their individual productivity, and she agreed immediately, causing him to glance away from his computer towards Kang. She reported that currently, redundant staff in each department represented about 15%, which wasn't much. It would be advisable to increase manpower and maximize productivity by reallocating redundant staff to the new business department. According to the ERP calculations, the proportion of personal expenses had a specific total cost. While she explained, Asura approached to look at Kang and her work, asking why she had decided to work at TK. She replied that it was because TK had some of the best salaries in the industry, which made him stop in surprise at her honesty. Slowly, Asura responded that sometimes it seemed like she was meant for more than just being an office worker. He had gotten his job thanks to his grandfather, but most people probably dreamed of becoming doctors or lawyers. That's why he thought Kang could have studied even further or gone to a different graduate school, given her great abilities. She could have easily earned a scholarship, which made Kang confess that she had always known she wasn't like other people. As soon as she entered elementary school, she mastered the basics of the curriculum, and as a result, she felt empty and lethargic for a long time, which worried her parents. This shocked Asura, as she was incredibly intelligent, and Kang explained that since her childhood, everything had been easy for her, nothing was particularly challenging. But her younger siblings were athletes. When they were younger, they were promising talents in the junior division. However, considering their skills and physical development, they had reached a point where it was more advantageous to switch to speed skating. Originally, her parents wanted her siblings to quit skiing and sent her to a graduate school, but then she insisted she would get a job. Everything would be fine, no matter what she did, but it was different for her siblings because this was all they had and could do. There was no need to become someone extraordinary. She preferred the happiness of living an ordinary life. She didn't need anything special, just her family and friends were enough for her now. This was impressive to Asura because throughout his life, he had always thought he needed to become someone extraordinary. Kang agreed that he was indeed extraordinary, which made him blush and ask her not to tease him like that. To which she replied that she would never do that, though Asura still shrank back, blushing, and told her at least to wipe her lips. Even though the protagonist was being serious, many people believed that Isiopter of the TK group was meant to be the most beautiful flower of all. Many resented Isiop for having a life without hardships, seeing him as a highborn flower with a splendid status. Perhaps it was because Isiop had been working hard his whole life to prove those people wrong. A little later, Isiop realized he had accidentally fallen asleep at his desk and looked at the clock, surprised that it was already past 1 a.m. He also noticed that Kang had fallen asleep on the sofa, and he approached her to wake her up, telling her she needed to go home and sleep more comfortably. However, she didn't wake up, so Isiop smiled and began teasing her, taking advantage of her sleep to call her silly. Noticing that she was deeply asleep, he found himself staring at her for too long, which stirred something in him again, so Isiop had to step away from Kang, grumbling to himself. On another day, on her way to work, Kang got caught in a terrible snowstorm as winter neared its end. Looking up at the sky, she was surprised at how much it was snowing that year. It seemed the final snowstorm would be relentless. A little later, she was meeting with Isiop, who remarked that they had finished the day's work and could finally take a break. The protagonist mentioned that she had just received a report on the accounting fraud at the resort and a list of the people responsible from the audit team, asking how they should handle it. They had also identified the information status shared among the team members, so she would schedule the meeting. Isiop sighed, thinking that most of these issues had been resolved during the last audit, but it seemed there was still a long way to go. Despite all the late hours of work to minimize the damage, the financial statements were still a big mess. Even though he felt disheartened, the protagonist smiled and told him there was still some good news, asking if he remembered when the Baekhyang Resort Union members had posted viral content online. Apparently, the RK group had ranked first in the reputation survey, and various media outlets and civil groups were applauding their recent actions, which made Isiop hesitate before replying that he had just done the obvious. He wasn't sure if he really deserved such praise after having acted passively for so long. Smiling, Kang replied that it might not seem obvious, but not everyone would have made the same decision he had, so he definitely deserved the praise. Isiop fell silent, still listening as the protagonist insisted that everything would be fine from now on and that only good things were ahead. She also said she intended to continue giving her best, right by his side, as they worked together. Hearing her words, he blushed slightly and stammered a thank you, but mentally he wondered how he had gotten such a good secretary while only managing to think of inappropriate things when he was alone, making him feel like a complete mess when Kang was so optimistic. Working together every day, he realized this more clearly. Kang not only did things quickly, but she was also incredibly efficient at her job. She had great stamina and enduring mental strength. She was like a machine, which is why the rumors among the staff about her being a robot were not far off given her performance. To his dismay, the truth was that Isiop liked that robot, his first love, after being single for 34 years, and she was a different species altogether. This only made things more torturous in the long run, and Isiop's nightmares about Kang came every night. The more he fought to escape those thoughts, fantasies that he felt awful for having, the more he couldn't stop imagining the details of those dreams. Now, Isiop was even afraid to fall asleep, fearing he would go through it all again, wishing he could have pure dreams once more. With all these nightmares and the constant work pressure, he felt more exhausted than ever. He just wished for all of this to end soon, but of course, things wouldn't happen that way. It was then that Isiop noticed Kang had received a message. She responded and placed her phone face down again. She commented that it was getting late and suggested they order dinner, making him blush as he realized how things had ended up like this. But instead of agreeing, Isiop took out his card and suggested that they go out for dinner, saying they could grab something delicious along the way. So, the two went out to a restaurant that surprised the protagonist with its luxury and elegance. It was even nicer than she had imagined it would be, and Isiop remarked that there were other good items on the menu besides the risotto. The protagonist opened the menu, excited and wondering what to choose, still catching Isiop's attention. He thought that he had never imagined being in a place like this with Kang, just the two of them, where so many couples usually came. It almost felt like a date, which made Isiop think that working late didn't seem so bad. He almost didn't want this moment to end. It made him want to work late every day, even on weekends, so they could go out more often and maybe even watch movies together, even to go to amusement parks, which made Isiop wonder if he was being an idiot for fantasizing about these things now. The protagonist noticed that Isiop wasn't eating and asked if he was feeling okay, but instead, he asked what she was doing that weekend. He was thinking about inviting her on a date, determined to make it happen. Kang paused to think for a moment, not noticing how fast Isiop's heart was beating in his chest. Then she responded that she would be going to Gongju's house, which left Isiop confused because Gongju meant princess. The protagonist explained that it was for the Lunar New Year, making him understand what she meant. Time passed again, and Kang felt that it had been a long time since she last experienced that feeling of comfort. On her way, she crossed paths with two elderly ladies who quickly recognized her, and Kang greeted them. The ladies laughed, saying they were surprised she was still alive because they thought they had lost her to Seoul, making the protagonist smile as well. The protagonist felt a bit embarrassed by the attention, but she brushed it off for the sake of her pride and enjoyment. As she continued towards her family's shop, she thought that her mother had probably put in more effort than necessary again. Still, she opened the door to announce to her mother that she was home, finally returning after such a long time. They had placed a sign outside to let people know they were closed on Sundays. Inside, it was a bit chaotic because the brothers were making a mess of dumplings that were so poorly made they couldn't be sold. This just made them laugh at the mess while Hyeon's mother sighed, saying she knew this would happen from the start. Boys couldn't be trusted with this kind of work, and their sister C agreed that they could just eat the ugly dumplings themselves. One of the twins was happy, while the other complained that instead of making dumplings, they should be practicing for the national team soon. Their mother asked if they were really trying out for the team, and they nodded, explaining that ever since they got sponsorships, their performances had improved significantly. They didn't have to stay on the sidelines anymore, and now their speed training was noteworthy and gaining recognition. It was great that their skills had improved. People at school and the skating rink were always buzzing with curiosity. They wondered why those kids were getting sponsored, and the twins laughed because sponsors only cared about star potential, not gossip. They felt proud knowing they were deserving of the recognition. They were quite the handsome pair of twins, something undeniable, given that their father was good-looking too, which was why their mother married him. In response, their father joked, asking why she was always attacking him when he never did anything, prompting her to hit him instantly and complained that it was precisely because he never helped. The father then asked Kang for help, asking her to stop her mother, while the twins kept laughing at the scene. That's when their mother commented that something felt strange, wondering if Kang had something to do with it, and Kang quickly denied it. But her mother didn't believe that made any sense, even though the protagonist insisted that it was the company that decided on sponsorships, and she had no way of knowing. Her mother agreed, but reminded her that she wasn't just any employee, she was the best one at TK. Beside them, Hyeon joked, asking how a single employee could change the company's sponsorships, adding that it was obvious they'd be fired for doing something like that. The protagonist sighed, asking him never to say something like that again, and Hyeon laughed at her because she almost choked at the thought of getting fired. Time passed, and the two of them were sitting at a table full of papers, with Hyeon stretching and commenting that the labor issue was the biggest problem of the day. Kang replied that considering how many people were affected, it was still the right thing to do despite everything. Suddenly, she received a call from Up and quickly stood up to answer it, stepping out of the kitchen to respond. Hyeon noticed her light expression and the slight blush on her cheeks during the call, a bit surprised by that reaction. Then, she looked at him and asked if the written contract for the business transfer had been corrected, the one that had the disagreement with the client's lawyer. Caught off guard, Hyeon stammered that it had been taken care of, and Kang relayed the information to Up over the phone. But she became nervous when Up started acting strange, not understanding what was going on, until he suddenly hung up. Beside her, Hyeon called out to her, asking if he was wrong. She could just laugh about it, but he wanted to know if there really wasn't anything between her and Up beyond a work relationship. That left her confused, but Hyeon's mother suddenly appeared, asking what kind of company made its employees work during the Lunar New Year, and if that's what big companies do, making the protagonist laugh as she responded that it was fine, she was working because she wanted to. Even though her mother commented that it was a holiday and noted how hard her daughter had been working lately, she asked if her daughter couldn't stop and eat a little, saying they could make jeon and eat some fruit together. Soon, Hyeon guested, saying Kang was busy and that she could leave everything to him. He would help her out. Then, he put on an apron. Her mother commented that her son was truly sweet and that it would be wonderful if he could marry with such skills. Later that evening, the protagonist asked her mother to leave the dishes for her to clean up later, but her mother replied that if she had finished working, she should just rest. Still, Kang stood up, saying she hadn't even managed to help in the kitchen and at least wanted to help with the cleaning. But again, her mother insisted that she should relax instead. Despite her mother's persistence, the protagonist didn't give up and took over the dishes, which made her mother a little concerned. A bit later, the two sat down to chop some leeks when her mother hesitated for a moment before bringing up a topic. She tearfully said that Kang didn't need to get married, wondering if she was working so hard because of her brothers. This reaction made the protagonist immediately stand up and comfort her mother, telling her she was just getting emotional with age. Though her mother said that Kang should live her own life too, the protagonist protagonist hugged her, reassuring her that she was, even as her mother tearfully added that she wished her daughter would not only be someone's wife, but also someone's mother. Kang told her not to worry, reassuring her that she wasn't seeing anyone. The next day, the whole family worked to serve the customers in the shop, including Kang, who was cheerfully attending to them. However, she was caught off guard when she saw someone suspicious wearing a hoodie, mask, and cap, trying to hide their identity. As many might have expected, after Isiop hung up the phone that way the other day, he went through the 5 stages of grief until he accepted that he was jealous of Hyun spending the holiday with her. Lying in bed, he wasted time on his phone until he decided to search for the location of her family's restaurant. Of course, he found out where it was, which made him sit up in bed and think for a moment before lying back down, feeling that visiting her family's restaurant during the holiday was too much. However, Isiop blushed as he realized he missed Kang and couldn't even entertain the idea of starting to like eating *makuksu*. So, he spent a few days mulling over it until he finally decided to travel to the restaurant, telling himself he would just eat *makuksu* and leave. He tried to disguise himself as subtly as possible, though he didn't realize that it was anything but a decent disguise. A bit later, he found himself explaining to Kang, swearing that it was just a coincidence and that he had simply wanted *makuksu*. She looked at him, questioning if he had to eat *makuksu* in Gonju specifically, to which he replied that he was there because of a contract. But she didn't believe it, especially since he was dressed like that and supposedly working on a holiday. Isiop stammered something about a friend, but then said it didn't matter because he had his own reasons. He removed his cap and asked if she could really kick out a customer like that, making her hesitate before telling him to leave. Isiop asked if he couldn't just visit his employee's family restaurant, order *makuksu*, and say hello to her family to be polite. Kang quickly denied this, already imagining that her parents would want to have a word with him for working her to the bone. She told him he should go before anyone saw him, though Isiop questioned why, when the place was even sponsored by TK. He suggested they could put up another banner saying how Isiop Tai ate there to help promote the shop even more. As he turned to go inside, the protagonist quickly hugged him to stop him, making Isiop blush deeply. Meanwhile, Hyun began calling for Kang near the entrance of the shop, and Isiop quickly noticed this. To avoid being caught, Isiop swiftly pulled Kang into the back room, pressing her against the shelf. Blushing, Kang asked why they needed to do this, and Isiop, also blushing, replied that he felt they couldn't be caught like that. It felt even stranger to Kang, until her glasses fell to the floor, prompting Isiop to realize he should give her a bit of space. But as he backed off, Kang slipped, causing a loud noise that Hyun heard from outside, though he didn't understand what it was. Isiop whispered for her to stay quiet or they would be caught, and Kang muttered that this was all his idea in the first place. Outside, Hyun picked up a broom, wondering if the noise was coming from a rat or something like that. The protagonist asked how he planned to explain the situation, and Isiop quickly covered her mouth with his hand, tense as he heard footsteps outside. He leaned down even closer over the protagonist on the table, and when Hyun looked inside, he couldn't see anything from that angle. At that moment, Hyun was distracted by the sound of the cat's meow and realized it must have been the source of the noise all along. Meanwhile, Kang and Isiop were still stuck in that awkwardly close distance. Seeing that Hyun's attention had shifted to the cat, Kang released Isiop's collar, noticing that he was blushing and sweating a little. She also removed his hand from her mouth to breathe, both still tense as Hyun was right outside, worried they might get caught. Outside, others were looking for Kang, wondering where she had gone when things were so busy, debating where they should go find her. The voices continued for a while until everyone left, prompting Isiop, still blushing, to mutter that Hyun was gone. But he leaned closer to her, whispering in her ear that it was just for now, causing Kang to shiver in surprise and kick him out immediately. Afterward, she got frustrated when she realized her glasses had broken in the fall, and Isiop apologized, suggesting they could blame the company for the damage. She asked why he had come there in the first place, and he stammered that he just wanted to eat *makuksu*, but she couldn't understand why he had to hide if that was the case. He stammered again, saying he had come all this way, so she might as well invite him to stay in the restaurant for a while. When Isiop apologized again, looking shy at Kang's irritation, she finally sighed and agreed, telling him to wait a moment. A little later, they were walking through the streets, with Isiop driving and apologizing repeatedly, explaining that he hadn't come to cause trouble. For now, he promised to buy her a new pair of glasses after the Lunar New Year was over, and she turned her gaze away, saying it was fine. She wondered why Isiop had traveled all the way to Gongju, even though he had said it was for work. Still, he came without a driver, and none of his excuses made sense. It was also the last day of the holiday, and now she was sitting next to her boss, with messy hair, broken glasses, and covered in dirt after lying in the storage room. She didn't feel like she could explain the situation to her parents, so Kang just left a note saying something urgent had come up, signing it so they'd know it was from her. Isiop had insisted on driving her back, taking full responsibility for the mess he had caused, which made her feel quite uncomfortable now. After a long silence, Kang looked at Isiop, trying to figure out why he had traveled so far just to come there. They arrived at a shopping mall, and Isiop tried to cheer up by commenting on how crowded it was because of the holiday, but Kang remained perfectly serious. He noticed that the Asterisk Veggie Rangers Asterisk, characters from a show the protagonist liked, were on display and promised to buy her one as a gift, but she stayed silent, watching as he searched for more of her favorite character, confused when he couldn't find anything. After a moment, Kang explained that Asterisk Kandoka Asterisk wasn't popular, so it was hard to find merchandise of him in smaller places like this. Even so, Isiop kept trying to stay upbeat, hoping to lift Kang's spirits, continuing like that the whole time. He boasted that he had won 6 toys at once from the machine, while the protagonist just nodded, still cold in her response. Then he handed her one of the toys, smiling as he placed it in her hand, saying it was a gift. Blushing, Kang pulled back and thanked him, noticing how unusually cheerful Isiop had been since they left the restaurant. Everything he did seemed to be about playing with people in his own way, which always left her confused. When they went to a cafe, the receptionist smiled and commented that they must be newlyweds, leaving Kang confused. The receptionist continued, praising Isiop for being such a handsome husband, making Kang laugh nervously and agree, though she still didn't seem excited. After they left with their food, Isiop asked why she hadn't corrected the receptionist earlier about them being newlyweds. Kang apologized if it bothered him, explaining that she just thought it would take too long to explain the truth. But he walked a little faster, stopping in front of her and saying it wasn't about that, it was about the fact that she agreed he was handsome. That made Kang blush, pushing him away while still holding her food, which ended up staining his hoodie. She tried to clean it with a napkin afterward, but he told her it was fine and that he could take care of it himself. Hesitating, the protagonist apologized, promising to buy him a drink to make up for the mess on his clothes. But Isiop insisted again that it wasn't a problem. It was all his fault for making a weird joke so suddenly. After a moment, she asked why he was doing this to her, showing up like that out of nowhere. It was completely unexpected. He didn't even eat street food like he was doing now, which frustrated her because she couldn't understand why he had made the whole trip. Kang asked if he was just trying to mess with her, torturing her for his own amusement, and Isiop replied that he was simply curious to see what the happy, ordinary life she once said she wanted was like. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, which made the protagonist look up at him again. Later, as they were driving back and the sun began to set, Kang called out to him, offering him something to eat. She explained that it was common for people to eat this type of food during long trips home. Isiop glanced at her, then smiled as he leaned over to take a bite of what she offered him. Back in Seoul, Kim greeted Isiop with a smile, asking if he had enjoyed the Lunar New Year. Beside him, Kang greeted Kim, and he responded with the same smile, excited to work with her again for another week. She looked up at Isiop, who had returned with her to their regular daily lives after a long and chaotic holiday. Now, they were communicating and living as they had always done before, working normally as if nothing had happened. The executive director acted the same as always. Nothing seemed to have changed between them, despite everything they had talked about and experienced over the holiday. But somehow, something between them felt different, not as familiar as before. One day, they entered the elevator together, and Isiop noticed that she was wearing glasses again. She turned her gaze away, explaining that she always had an extra pair of identical glasses just in case something happened. He observed her for a moment, making her blush as he asked if that was really the case, then casually added that it was a shame because she had beautiful eyes. He said this and left the elevator casually, leaving Kang blushing behind, hesitant to step out after him. It made her think she needed to pull herself together somehow, but it was difficult when he made comments like that. Later, the mansion's kitchen was bustling, with the cooks preparing some fish and adding more garlic. They added 3 pieces of Cheongyang chili with seasonal spices, giving Sunny a chance to taste the dish. She advised them to sweeten it more because he had been saying recently that everything tasted bitter. Honey was too sticky. They should try sugar syrup instead. As the kitchen staff continued preparing, a servant approached to inform her that Director Ta had arrived. In the sitting room, Isiop and Kang greeted Sunay, who smiled as she approached them, engaging in conversation. She mentioned hearing that Kang had been called to Songbakche and said it was always wonderful to see her again. They sat down for tea, and Sunhae asked if her son had been taking his medicine well, to which the protagonist agreed, saying he had nearly finished it all. This impressed Sunhae, who looked at Asura, and he responded that it wasn't so bad thanks to Kang's help. Proud of her son, Sunhae pinched his cheeks, making him hesitate before asking why she seemed so busy today. It was different from usual. Sighing, Sunhae explained that President Tae had invited that girl for dinner that night, Junseup's fiancé, Woo Kyung-yeon. They were welcoming a new member to the family, so Sunhae had been working harder than usual to make everything perfect. Isup remarked that it sounded exhausting for his mother and asked how long she had been busy with this. She replied that it was nothing to worry about, it was the least she could do. Isup chuckled, knowing that Junseop would appreciate it very much. Sunhae truly hoped for Junseop's recognition, as after the company's downfall, he had finally been able to marry, even if it was to someone from an ordinary family. He was just like his mother, having a weakness for such things, and Isup corrected her, saying that Yeon was a good person. But Sunhae didn't seem convinced, saying that people eventually change, and questioning why he would want to marry someone who wouldn't bring any benefit. Junseop was in a high enough position where he needed to learn to control his fragile and volatile emotions. After a moment, Isup asked what was bothering his mother. She seemed troubled by something that must have happened. Placing her hand on Sunhae's, Kang hesitated, noticing Sunhae's irritated expression as she revealed that she had heard about the engagement plans. She couldn't believe that he had asked her to do this for Seovi Tae's son. It was too harsh a motivation. Isup tried to snap her out of her irritation, and Sunhae apologized for venting her frustrations in front of the protagonist, acknowledging that it had nothing to do with her. She suggested that Kang could leave now, giving a tense smile as she mentioned that Kang should go see President Ta, and that she herself would return to the preparations. With that, Kang went to meet with Suwon, who began reporting that the expected sales had broken the historical maximum of 2.5 trillion won. However, operating profit had decreased by 8% due to employee-related expenses following the recent incidents. Even so, given the nature of the service sector, they expected to see positive public opinion generated by the business's success, ensuring future impact. In terms of sales, they were pursuing expansion by reallocating redundant staff to new business units, with a management goal of increasing sales by 300% over the next 5 years. But Suwon cut her off, stating that anyone could expand and forecast sales. He despised people who were too basic and made claims without evidence, staring at her and asking if Kang was one of those people. In response, Kang asserted that there was plenty of evidence. As a result of the increased customer loyalty index, the repurchase rate had risen by 150%. This offset the reduction in operating profit, and along with sales growth, the ESG index and brand reputation had increased by 120% compared to the previous quarter, which directly reflected the rise in stock prices. The PR team was preparing several campaigns and press releases in line with the completion of the renovation. The marketing strategy leveraged the favorable public opinion about Executive Director Tae, so they expected a positive impact on the brand. She was confident they could achieve the goal and asked Siwon to trust them, promising that he wouldn't be disappointed. After a moment of silence, Siwon responded that he wouldn't have called her there if he didn't trust her from the beginning. It was a compliment, and the protagonist thanked him for it, but he insisted that he had called her for a different reason. He stated that she must know well what kind of company TK Fashion was, and the protagonist agreed. Siwon asked if she was aware that the textile business was tied to the TK group, and Kang confirmed she was. This led Siwon to reveal that the head of the fashion division was currently vacant, and obviously things weren't going well. That was why Siwon was considering appointing Isup as the head of TK Fashion, and he wanted her to keep that in mind. This revelation caught the protagonist completely off guard, freezing her in surprise and slight shock. A bit later, as they walked through the garden, Kang still pondered the idea of Isup becoming the head of TK Fashion. Although it wasn't entirely unexpected, President Ta had started the fashion business by selling fabrics for trade and personally managing subcontracting. It was clear he had a special affection for TK Fashion. TK Fashion and Apparel had grown into a massive company, but it had been divided into other divisions as part of the group's new restructuring. The smart move would have been to sell off the low-profit fashion division after the reorganization, but Kang believed it wouldn't be an easy decision for Siwon to make. However, the head of TK Fashion was a very vulnerable position, and if Executive Director Tae found out about this, he would surely be furious. Furthermore, the protagonist herself wasn't sure where they were heading now, walking through the garden as nightfall approached. After some time, they encountered Jiyoon Ta, Siwon's eldest daughter, and Yeon, Junseup's fiancé, also appeared. Jiyoon was surprised, remarking how even Yeon's name was beautiful, and asked if Junseup was good enough for her. This made Yeon stammer until Junseup wrapped his arm around her, and the two smiled at each other. Yeon blushed and agreed, making Jiyoon laugh, commenting that they were indeed very sweet together. Suddenly, there was an announcement that the president had arrived, and Suwon appeared, accompanied by Kang. Sujin stood up in shock, and Sunnae asked why she was there, leaving Kang nervous because she didn't know the reason either. She stammered that they should enjoy dinner while she excused herself, but Suwon instructed her to sit down, surprising her once again. Jiyoon questioned what he intended by seating an employee at the dinner table in such an ill-mannered way. Sunnae smiled, trying to ease the tension, saying they didn't want to make Kang uncomfortable. When Suwon asked if she felt out of place, the protagonist stammered that she didn't. Suwon stated that a member of the TK family was present at the dinner, and they couldn't just send her away like that, so he instructed them to bring more utensils for her. As they sat down, he asked about the wedding preparations and why Sunnae hadn't mentioned anything yet, offering to help her with the arrangements. This made Sunnae nervous, as she replied that she could handle it herself. Junseop then spoke up, telling the president that he wanted to take his time with their engagement and move slowly toward marriage. Suwon asked why, and Junseop explained that Yeon was still somewhat young for marriage, to which she mentioned she would be turning 29 soon. The elder responded that 29 was not young, and Junseop was too old to be saying such things. Still, Junseop joked that his fiancée still seemed like a baby to him, flirting in a way that made her blush and caused Jiyoon to laugh. Witnessing that cheesy display of affection, Asura, who had been quietly listening, cringed in second-hand embarrassment. Blushing, Yeon stammered an apology, admitting that she was still lacking in many ways. Suwon then asked when exactly they planned to marry. He also questioned if they were aware that he had initially been against their relationship, to which Junseop replied that there had only been an order for the marriage. This was the first marriage in the family, so Junseop believed it was only right that the eldest son of his uncle marry first, which surprised Asura. Junseop added that since Asura was the eldest son of the family, they would take their time until he got married. Sunnae stammered a thank you for the consideration, but Asura choked on his food, wondering what Junseop's problem was for saying such things. However, Suwon agreed that Junseop had a point and asked if Asura was seeing someone, catching him off guard. He nervously glanced at Kang from across the table before looking away and denying that he was seeing anyone. That's when Jiyoon teased that she had never seen Asura bring a girlfriend home before, making him even more flustered as he tried to explain himself. She continued, saying there was a name for people like him nowadays. They were probably called loners, and Junseop agreed. In response to this humiliation, Asura stomped on Junseop's foot, telling him to shut up, which made Junseop chuckle quietly. Suwon scolded Asura, shouting and hitting the table, asking how he still hadn't found a woman at his age and questioning what he had been doing all this time. Jiyoon then joked that it was better than being a womanizer like their father, which this time enraged Sunnae. She laughed nervously, saying it was just a joke, while Kang shrank back, feeling too tense to get involved in the conversation. After a moment of silence, Suwon declared that he would arrange for Asura to meet Professor Choi's daughter. This made Jiyoon protest, reminding him that Haeyoung Choi had always had a crush on Junseop. She added that Haeyoung had said she would rather continue her studies if it wasn't with Junseop, which is why she stayed in Germany. Plus, Asura wasn't even interested in her. Suwon was shocked, asking if that was true. Asura hesitated before agreeing, while Sunnae reassured her father that Asura would find a suitable partner soon. This surprised Asura, who glanced at his mother, but she continued, explaining that they had just been putting it off because he had been too busy. Suwon then ordered that they find a way for Asura to get married by the end of the year, insisting that the executive director needed to be committed quickly. Asura protested, saying that he worked late into the night and didn't have time for dating or distractions. He didn't see the need to get married so urgently, but Suwon countered, saying that if a man wanted success, he needed the support of a wife. Marriage was as important as work, at which point Sujin interrupted, saying that Asura had never had the chance to meet anyone because he was always too busy. Now, forcing him to find a wife just made her feel bad for him. At this, Sunnae scolded her for being rude to her grandfather. Jiyoon, however, wasn't concerned, confidently stating that their mother could easily choose a good woman, well-educated, beautiful, and from a wealthy family. Even if that didn't matter to Asura, Jiyoon insisted that it should. He should marry someone well-off, just as their father had. The longer he waited, the harder it would be to find someone, which made Asura clench his fists, visibly irritated. Slowly, he responded sarcastically, saying it seemed as though getting married was as simple as mating. Sunnae tried to calm Asura, but he continued, asking why it bothered them so much to the point of forcing him to get married like this. He didn't want to share his space with anyone and couldn't sleep with people nearby. It made him uncomfortable to have others take care of him, so he preferred to be alone. This made his mother ask why he was saying such things. Was it because he was choosing to stay single or something? Hearing this, Jiyoon questioned why he was getting so agitated, but she agreed that there wasn't much point in a marriage that didn't come from dating first, like what Junseop was doing. She could understand how Asura felt, even after being divorced for several years. The table fell into a tense silence, despite Ji-yoon laughing at her sharp jokes, which were a bit too acidic to be taken lightly. As everyone went quiet, even the protagonist felt nervous amidst the family tension. Eventually, Isup said he was just thinking out loud and confessed that he was a bit envious of Junsup. Marriage didn't seem that bad, challenging Junsup to take the opportunity to brag. Thus, the dinner continued, and the atmosphere gradually improved, but Kang noticed that Isup remained quiet. He glanced at the protagonist, wondering what exactly she thought of the whole situation. Now, he felt exposed and uncomfortable, but he assumed Kang probably didn't feel that way. After all, she had been smiling and chatting during the dinner. That was to be expected, since there was nothing between them, but it still left him feeling a bit lonely and hurt. He could only watch Kang talk with others after dinner as she turned to leave. However, Isup stopped in his tracks and rushed to grab her wrist, acting on an impulse to speak with her. He told her he would accompany her home, which surprised her, and she pulled her hand away, averting her gaze and saying it was fine. Still, Isup leaned in to whisper that he would be waiting for her at the back gate. He then turned and walked away, leaving the protagonist behind, speechless and deep in thought. Soon after, the two were in the car, with Isup driving her home late at night through the city. That's when he started talking, commenting that the earlier situation had been pretty uncomfortable. She replied that it wasn't that bad and apologized for joining such an intimate family dinner. This made him go silent for a moment, before he said it was somewhat funny to think about getting married when he had never been in a relationship before. Kang stayed silent, listening, and then responded that he would certainly be happy because he was a wonderful person. Slowly, Isup revealed that he wanted to marry someone he loved, which made the protagonist's eyes widen. He mentioned that he knew she must have been in relationships before, and the protagonist admitted that she had, but she wasn't very good at it. She explained that she wasn't the kind of person who was good at taking care of others, so her partners always ended up getting hurt. But Isup retorted that this didn't seem true at all. Maybe it was because what they had now was purely work-related. The protagonist hesitated to reply, and Isup was momentarily distracted by the honking of cars as he lost focus on the road. He continued driving the rest of the way in silence, both of them deep in thought and feeling a bit tense. At home, Kang went straight to the bathroom and sighed with relief, glad to finally have a moment to relax. She thought about Yeon, who was certainly sweet and kind. It made sense that someone like Junsup, usually cold-hearted, would be smitten with her. After all, Yeon was incredibly beautiful too, which made the protagonist sink deeper into the bath, wondering what kind of woman the executive director would want to marry someday. Surely, someone like Yeon would be a perfect match. Isup was kind, talented, and responsible, and getting to know him better revealed that he had a gentle heart. A woman who wanted to marry a man like him would undoubtedly end up very happy over time. After her bath, Kang stood in front of the mirror to do her skincare routine, examining her face and thinking that she looked stern when she didn't smile. Her nose was strong, almost masculine, and she had those lips too, which made her touch her face thoughtfully. She remembered the moment when Isup had eaten the candy from her hand, his lips brushing against her fingers. Realizing she was daydreaming too much, she lightly slapped her face, trying not to blush at the memory. She wondered what on earth she was thinking. It should all just be about work. She repeated this to herself several times. What should she do about the situation with TK Fashion? Should she tell the executive director the truth? That's when the protagonist looked at the gift she had received earlier from Lee, deciding to pick up the ribbon and considering wearing it. The next day, Kang went to work as usual, but people around her stopped to give her a second glance. That day, the female employees complimented her, saying she looked very beautiful, like a completely different person in that outfit. Kang replied that it was only because it was an important day. The manager laughed, saying he didn't know there was such an occasion, and that he hadn't seen her dressed like this in the past 10 years. Kang laughed nervously as the manager asked if she had started dating someone, given how she was dressing. Suddenly, Isup interrupted, questioning why they were making such a fuss. Kang could dress however she wanted, just because she wanted to. The employees greeted him, and he told everyone to get ready, as they had been chatting for too long. The manager agreed and nervously rushed to prepare the necessary documents for work. Isup instructed them to do a second check on the contract and reconfirm the transfer dates properly to avoid any issues. Time passed until the day of the M and a contract arrived, and Kim complimented the protagonist, saying she looked great that day. He almost didn't recognize her at first, commenting that she looked quite different from the moment he saw her without glasses. Kim teased that she looked beautiful and asked if Isup didn't think so too, making the protagonist blush as she admitted feeling a bit embarrassed. Kim asked if Kang hadn't expected to get this much attention, given that she had been wearing the same clothes for 10 years. Isup listened as Kim agreed, curious if there was anything special about that day. The protagonist stammered that it was only because it was the day of the contract. Besides, she thought it would be a good time to start focusing on fashion. This caught Isiop's attention as he heard her ask if she looked strange like this, making the two of them lock eyes in the car for a while. Then he responded that she still looked like the same person as always, making Kang laugh nervously and turn away. However, he noticed that she seemed bothered because he hadn't given her the compliment she was hoping for, pouting a little. This made Isiop burst into laughter, causing Kang to glare at him in irritation, even as he told her that she had always been beautiful, not just now. That made her blush in surprise, stammering a thank you, even making Kim tense up while driving. The signing of the contract for the Bakyang Resort merger and acquisition deal took place privately in a small conference room. It was a modest-scale business with nothing but losses compared to the chaos of TK in the past. The contract signing was quiet, but for Isiop, this contract represented stepping out of Seo Tae's shadow, marking his transition from being TK's heir to becoming the true Isiop Tae of TK. It was the first time all his management principles would be fully applied to his employees, and with that, the legal procedure for the M and a contract was complete. One of the men commented that the contract was finally signed, and there were no more issues, with both parties happy with the conditions presented after all the hard work. All the legal contracts were finalized, along with their procedures. Isiop responded that the actions of opposing shareholders who had been bought out and the approval of the shareholders' assembly shouldn't be a problem. It seemed they had finally managed to complete everything perfectly, so he praised everyone for their excellent work. He thanked them for being able to persuade the shareholders throughout the process, leaving the employees feeling flattered. They decided they could all have a company dinner, and Kang agreed as she had already prepared all the tables. M and P and their lawyers had worked hard to please the shareholders and persuade the creditors. They were the true stars of the negotiation. So, the protagonist invited them to the dinner, which left Isiop less than thrilled, though they eagerly agreed. This made Isiop glare at Hyeon with nothing but tension in his eyes, although he forced himself to agree to let them join. Later, everyone gathered, drinking and celebrating, trying to please Isiop with drinks and thanking him for being there with them. The employees showered him with praise, saying it was all thanks to Isiop's efforts and dedication that they had succeeded. Despite being filled with compliments, Isiop couldn't stop thinking they should stop trying to buy his favor. Still, they all raised their glasses in a toast to Isiop, while the protagonist was chatting with Hyeon and the other employees at a different table. This made Isiop wonder what kind of cheerful atmosphere they were sharing, prompting him to drink quickly, wanting to find an opportunity to send everyone home. He just wanted to sit at the table with Kang and enjoy his time celebrating alongside only her. To ensure you don't miss the unfolding of this romance, give a gentle tap on the notification bell, and I see you on the next tale.